You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Today we're reading from Dorfman and Mallart's book, How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. And this is from the preface to the English edition. This book was first published in Spanish. To say that this book was burnt in Chile should not come as a surprise to anyone. Hundreds of books were destroyed and thousands more prohibited and censored. It was written in the middle of 1971, in the middle of the Chilean revolutionary process. Copper had been rescued. The land was being returned to the peasantry. The whole Chilean people were recovering the industries that during the 20th century had been the means of enrichment for Mr. Rockefeller, Grace, Guggenheim, and Morgan. Because this process was intolerable to the United States government and its multinational corporations, it had to be stopped. They organized a plan which at the time was suspected and since has been confirmed by Mr. Kissinger, Ford, and Colby to have been directed and financed by the United States intelligence services. Their objective was to overthrow the constitutional government of Chile. To realize their objective, an invisible blockade was imposed. Credits were denied, spare parts purchased for industrial machinery were not sent, and later the Chilean state bank accounts in the U.S. were blocked, and an embargo preventing the sale of Chilean copper throughout the world was organized. There were, however, two items which were not blocked: planes, tanks, ships, and technical assistance for the Chilean armed forces, and magazines, TV serials, advertising, and public opinion polls for the Chilean mass media, which continued for the most part to be in the hands of a small group which was losing its privileges. To maintain them with those of the U.S., their media prepared the climate for the bourgeois insurrection, which finally materialized some years later on the 11th of September, 1973. Each day, with expert U.S. advice, in each newspaper, each weekly, each monthly magazine, each news dispatch, each movie, and each comic book, their arsenal of psychological warfare was fortified. In the words of General Pinochet, the point was, quote, to conquer the minds, end quote, while in the words of Donald Duck in the magazine Dislandia, published in December 1971, coinciding with the first mass rallies of native fascism, the so-called March of the Empty Pots and Pans, the point was to, quote, restore the king. But the people did not want the restoration of the king, nor of the businessman. The popular Chilean cultural offensive, which accompanied the social and economic liberation, took multiple forms: wall paintings, popular papers, TV programs, motion pictures, theater, songs, literature. In all areas of human activity, with differing degrees of intensity, the people expressed their will. Perhaps the most important arm of this offensive was the work of the state publishing house, Quimantu, a word meaning sunshine of knowledge in the language of the Chilean Machupe Indians. In 2.5 years, it published 5 million books, twice the amount that had been published in all of Chile during the previous 70 years. In addition, it transformed the content of some of the magazines it had inherited from before the popular unity government and created new ones. It is in this multifaceted context, with the people on the march to cultural liberation, a process which also meant criticizing the mass cultural merchandise exported so profitably by the U.S. into the Third World, that How to Read Donald Duck was generated. We simply answered a practical need. It was not an academic exercise. For the Mad Dog Warriors on that September 11th, there were no paintings on the walls. There were only enormous stains which dirtied the city in memory. They, using the fascist youth brigades, whitewashed all the signing, many-colored walls of the nation. They broke records, murdered singers, destroyed radios and printing presses, imprisoned and executed journalists, so that nothing would be left to remind anybody of anything about the struggle for national liberation. But it was not enough to clean these cultural stains from the street. The most important task was to eliminate all those who bore the stain inside themselves: the fighters, workers, peasants, employees, students, and patriotic soldiers, to eliminate these creators of a new life, to eliminate this new life which grew, and for all that we created. This book, conceived for the Chilean people and our urgent needs, produced in the midst of our struggle, is now being published far from Chile in the uncle land of Disney, behind the barbed wire network of ITT. Mr. Disney, we are returning your duck, feathers plucked and well roasted. Look inside, you can see the handwriting on the wall, our hands still writing on the wall, Donald, go home. This is written in 1975. And then this from David Kunzel's introduction. The names of the presidents change. That of Disney remains. 46 years after the birth of Mickey Mouse, 8 years after the death of his master, Disney's may be the most widely known North American name in the world. He is arguably the century's most important figure in bourgeois popular culture. He has done more than any single person to disseminate around the world certain myths upon which that culture has thrived, notably that of an innocence supposedly universal, beyond place, beyond time, and beyond criticism. The myth of U.S. political innocence is at last being dismantled, and the reality which it masks lies in significant areas exposed to public view. But the great American dream of cultural innocence still holds a global imagination in thrall. The first major breach into the Disney of this dream was made by Richard Schickel's The Disney Version, The Lifetimes and Commerce of Walt Disney, the book How to Read Donald Duck.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, it's Thursday, so it must mean that Donald Trump has gone nuts again the night before. Of course, this rally was originally planned yesterday. And by the way, welcome to our program, all of you who actually love our country and care about its fate and future, unlike, the twits over at Fox News. It's just absolutely amazing. BuzzFlash, by the way, buzzflash.com has been relaunched. This a website that our old buddy Mark Carlin used to run. He's running it again. And in fact, it was founded back in 2000, 19 years ago. And the top story, Trump goes full demagogue at Wednesday night campaign rally, leads crowd in chilling chant of "Send her back, fascism on the rise." Here's the chant. Maybe we don't have the chant. Anyhow, this is, this is just like major full fascism. I don't know how to describe it beyond that. And it is, I think, a really, really dangerous thing. Keep in mind, we have had a number of murders. Trump went after the press. This guy walks into a newspaper up in the upper Midwest. My recollection is it was in Wisconsin. I may be wrong on that. It's been a year or more. Walks in and kills 4 journalists. Trump goes off on people of color. Dylan Roof walks into this church in North Carolina and shoots a bunch of parishioners, including a state senator. The Tiki Torch guys come out and this guy who just got 400 years in jail for it kills Heather Heyer. I'm really concerned that Donald Trump is going to get AOC or Ilhan, in particular Ilhan Omar, killed. These members of Congress. And when he does his Nuremberg rally stuff, and this is what it sounds like.
Omar laughed that Americans speak of Al-Qaeda in a menacing tone and remarked that you don't say America with this intensity. You say Al-Qaeda makes you proud. Al-Qaeda makes you proud. You don't speak that way about America. And at a press conference just this week, when asked whether she supported Al-Qaeda, that's our enemy. That's
this is Trump going on. This is the press conference where where,
serious
Omar was asked, do you love America?
that we take
And she said,
care
I'm not
of,
even
but
going to
they
dignify
always
that
seem to
question.
come along
And so
somewhere.
here's this
She
fool.
refused to answer.
She
didn't want
refused
give
to
an
answer.
to that question. Omar
So,
blamed
can we
the
get
United
right to the-
States for the crisis in Venezuela. I mean, think of that one.
Yeah,
And she looks
just stop it
down
right
with
there. I
contempt
really don't
for
want to hear
the
Donald Trump anymore. It makes me want to puke. So anyhow, I think he's trying to get her killed, and all these people are chanting, send her back, send her back, send her back. This is like the friggin' Nuremberg rally. Lindsey Graham comes right out and says what it's all about, right? In a way. What he's saying is, oh, it's not her race. It's that she's a liberal. You get that? Or maybe he's trying to say it's that she's a Muslim, except that Trump is going after AOC as well, who's Catholic. So I think it's got to be liberals. I mean, he said, if she was wearing a MAGA hat, she'd be welcome to the White House. Because they just, love the occasional black person who's willing to show up in a shot with Donald Trump. This is obscene. And then CNN puts on a panel of average Republican women. And it turns out that these average Republican women were all part of a group called Trumpettes of America, 2019 Palm Beach team. And CNN has done this apparently several times, and now they're being called out. So, anyhow, that's happening. Jeffrey Epstein is going to remain in jail. That's happening. The documents, all this stuff that came out on Donald Trump committing crimes, actual crimes, campaign violations. You could argue that he would not be president right now if Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal had been allowed to tell their stories. But he paid them off to shut them up and had them sign these draconian contracts that basically threatened them with, loss of everything for the rest of their lives. And they kept their silence until after the election. Michael Cohen is sitting in jail right now because he made this happen. Donald Trump ordered him to, but because the Justice Department is run by Bill Barr, and they keep pointing back to this time when the Nixon Justice Department said, oh, you can't put Nixon in jail. And then the Bush W. Justice Department, at the time that we were talking about putting Bush in jail for human rights violations and torture, said, oh, you can't put any president in jail. This is not a law. It's the opinion of a lawyer in the Justice Department. But Bill Barr is using this to say, oh, well, we're not going to even investigate the Trump Organization. Literally a week or two or three after Bill Barr became Attorney General, the investigation that the Southern District of New York was doing into, this federal investigation into campaign finance crimes being committed by Trump and the Trump Organization. Specifically, paying off McDougal and Daniels. Actually, her name is Stephanie Clifford, but, we all know her as Stormy Daniels. Paying them off. Bill Barr says, oh, let's stop that investigation. Bill Barr has stopped 7 of the investigations that Mueller started. No publicity about this at all. Donald Trump has taken over the Justice Department through his toady, Bill Barr, the guy who covered up Iran-Contra on behalf of George Herbert Walker Bush and Ronald Reagan back in '92. And now he's doing this. And the papers just came out, and it's probably going to be later this afternoon. It turns out it was 300 and some odd pages, and people are just starting to read it. But it apparently it wasn't just Trump and Cohen. That Hope Hicks at least was involved in this thing. There was a conspiracy inside the Trump Organization to break the laws of the United States. Campaign finance violations like this involve huge fines and jail time. As I said, it's one of the reasons why Michael Cohen is sitting in jail right now. I'm just fried by this. And meanwhile, the 9/11 victims, the guy who testified before Congress a couple of weeks ago died You know, he was literally on death's door. He had been on this program years ago. And along with his best friend, who died right after he was on this program. And the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund, you know, when Rand Paul and Mike Lee were all gung-ho for the tax cut, they didn't care if it was paid for. But now that we're going to help out 9/11 victims, oh my God, this thing has not been paid for. How can we set aside a few $1 million for these poor victims who are dying left and right, who rushed to 9/11 to help out, when we haven't paid for it? These screaming, flaming, bloody hypocrites. I mean, if you might want to call Rand Paul or Mike Lee, the number is 202-225-3121 for the Senate switchboard. And let them know what you think about that. But none of those are the topics I was going to start off with today, and I want to get to this too. Thomas Friedman has got an op-ed on the front page of the New York Times today. You know, he's that confused billionaire who wrote the book The Olive Tree and the Lexus, talking about how the Lexus, you know, the luxury car made by, I think it's Toyota. It's either Toyota or Honda. One of them makes Lexus and the other makes Infiniti. Pretty sure it's Toyota. The Lexus was the result of the free market and of free trade deals. Thomas Friedman has been an advocate of this stuff forever. Turns out after his book was published, we all discovered that it was complete BS. The Lexus was, you know, Toyota was successful because, you know, back in the 70s, Japan had massive subsidies for Toyota, number one. Number two, they blocked the import of American cars into Japan to give Toyota a domestic foothold, you know, with huge tariffs. And number three, they subsidized the exports of Toyota and the development of the Lexus. Oh, but isn't that great? So this was, you know, Friedman's first duh. And then, you know, Bush lies us into a war in Iraq, and Friedman keeps coming out and saying it's going to just be another 6 months. And so everybody says, oh, these are Friedman units, 6 months. Well, we've got 3 Friedman units until the election. And Thomas Friedman is coming out saying, yeah, you know, we really need to keep giving our for-profit insurance companies and big pharma nearly twice as much money as any other country on earth pays for health care so that they can pad their bottom lines. This is how billionaires think, right, when they write for the New York Times. He thinks that if people in the U.S. have a contagious disease, we should check their citizenship before giving them treatment. Again, you know, only a billionaire like Trump or Friedman, who lives in a world where they don't have to interact with average people or walk down normal streets, would think that we should check somebody's citizenship before we determine, you know, whether or not they're going to get health care for their contagious illness. He says the Democrats are only going to be brought together by fear of Trump. Because Americans really, I mean, you know, the implicit message is that Americans really don't want to return to the values of FDR's New Deal or LBJ's Great Society. He quotes a Democratic politician who complains that her critics say she's too close to business. Right. Democrats need to stay in bed with the fat cats from corporate America. It's the only way to beat Trump. You know, Trump won by trashing the fat cats in corporate America. Has anybody, could somebody tell Tom Friedman, please? Donald Trump campaigned saying, you know, the whole system is rigged. These fat cats. He says, I know how to play the system. I buy politicians all the time. He's a businessman. Corporations buying politicians. And Friedman says, oh, no, we should be really, you know, more of our Democrats should be bought by businesses. I don't think we want that. I don't think the American electorate wants that. I think the American electorate wants the big banks broken up. They want them re-regulated. They want people to be able to go to college or trade school without going into debt. They want people to be able to have health care without paying, you know, giant premiums to health insurance companies so that CEOs can take hundreds of millions of dollars, literally. Workers want to have decent pay and the right to unionize. These are the issues, by the way, that the squad is talking about. And the billionaires, you know, frankly, I think that if we run the Friedman's platform, we lose.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This so-called moderate platform, the so-called free trade, the so-called, yes, you know, we're business friendly. No, we'll lose. And welcome back. Amazing. Ralph in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hey, Ralph, what's up?
I don't know what, Tom. There's so many things to rant about. You don't know which one to pick, do you, really?
Yeah. Well, I put about a half a dozen things on the table here when we started out.
Yeah. Well, don't people realize that what scares me is not so much Trump, is all these people that show up at these rallies. I mean, they look like good people, decent people. I mean, why are they so mad?
Because they've been watching Fox News, Ralph. The Fox News is a 24/7 brainwashing operation run by billionaire Rupert Murdoch for the benefit of the billionaire class. And the billionaire class can only remain the billionaire class if they can split average Americans from each other, if they can cause us to hate each other. This is their principal strategy.
They can be doing a good job, but don't this country realize, that our strength, Tom, is our diversity. I mean, I work at a school here in Knoxville. I'm a crossing guard, and I work at a jewel. I mean, this kid, it's what they call it, a magnet school. Mm-hmm. And the richer people here, or they're not the well-to-do professors at the University of Tennessee and some store owners, they bring their kids there because the curriculum that the school offers. We've also got some Oriental people. Some Latino people, and we got, it's in a predominantly poor neighborhood, but the school is a great school, and it warms my heart when I see those kids walk across the street, old mans, black, white, Latino. We got kids over there can't even speak English. Why people hate people because they can't speak the same language that you do? But what's the topic? I'm changing the subject. What scares me, if Donald Trump does lose this next election, which I'm hoping and praying to God that he does, that these people, how long did it take the people in Germany or Italy to learn that they'd been had? I call him Dom the Con, yeah, and Donald the Ducker, that there'd be riots, and that people will, actually...
There will be a certain point where it can't be undone, and I'm going to lay out the structural how-to about that in the second hour of the program today. But there will be a point where it can't be undone. And the question, in my mind, is whether that point will come before or after, if Trump gets reelected, before or after the election. And I'm guessing it'll come after the election because I don't think he has enough political power right now. But if they can take back the House, it'll happen very, very quickly.
What do you mean, the Senate?
No, I mean, if the Republicans can take back the House.
Oh, okay. Well,
they will turn this country into a fascist nation as fast as, just lickety-split.
It scares me. I mean, I actually, as far as the ordinary citizen goes, I've got it made. I mean, I've got health care. I've got, Social Security coming in. I'm a disabled veteran. I've got to check him. And my hope and pray before I die that I see everyone in this country have affordable health care. Yeah. I mean, that's my dream. But okay, Tom. Yeah.
It's amazing. Isn't it amazing, Ralph, when you think about it, that your hope and dream is that America, before you die, will have what Canada has had since the 1960s?
That would be nice.
I mean, it's just, when you put it in that context, it's like, it's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. Ralph, thanks a lot for the call. Yeah, good talking with you. We'll be back. Amazing. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, I guess the larger question that I'm asking here is, what do Democrats really want? And, I toss that question out to you, too. Is Tom Friedman right that what Democrats want is basically a continuation of the Obama presidency and the Clinton presidency? Where, we continue to pay 19% of our GDP to health insurance companies and big pharma, where every other civilized, developed country in the world is paying 9% of their GDP for health care? Do we want to continue to have young people come out of college so deeply in debt that it will be a decade or 2 decades before they can even afford to get married or have children or buy a house? Do we want to continue to live in a country where it's almost impossible for workers in a workplace to unionize? Do we want to continue to live in a country where the minimum wage right now is 1/3 of what it was in inflation-adjusted terms, 1/3 of what it was in 1968? Where the standard of living of working people working at the minimum wage is 1/3 of what it was in 68? Do we want to continue to live in that country? Or do we want to live in a country where the minimum wage actually reflects a living wage? Where people have the right to unionize? Where if you get sick, it's not going to cause you to go bankrupt, and you don't have to make decisions about whether you're going to pay your rent or pay your health insurance every month? Where do we want to live in a country where people can go to college or trade school and graduate without debt? I mean, keep in mind, in every other developed country in the world, there is no student debt crisis. In Denmark, they pay you $200 a month to go to college. Every other developed country in the world, no student debt crisis. We're the only one. Every other country in the world, the number of bankruptcies caused by somebody getting sick is 0. Of the 34 OECD countries, the most developed countries, 33 of them have no medical bankruptcies. 0. In Canada, for example, and this is, frankly, I think Democrats need to start campaigning on Canada. Why is it that you can go to college in Canada and graduate without student debt? Why is it that in Canada the minimum wage is in the neighborhood of what it was in the 60s? Why is it that in Canada nobody goes broke because they get sick? Why can't we have what Canada has? Why do Republicans want to keep us on the track to be like, I don't know. I mean, I was going to say Mexico, but even in Mexico, college is relatively affordable and healthcare is inexpensive, and I mean, it's like, why do Republicans? Well, that's another question. But I guess the question, the question that I really want to ask, and although I've thrown a lot of topics out, is what is it the Democrats really want? Do we want, and again, please don't personalize this to individual candidates, because I know that there are some candidates who are basically campaigning on saying, let's just continue the Clinton and Obama presidencies. And there are other candidates who are campaigning on saying, no, let's go back to FDR and LBJ's, great New Deal and Great Society. Now, nobody's saying it out loud that way, and frankly, they should be, and frankly, the media should be. People should be, just identifying it that way. But what do you think Democrats want? What is a winning Democratic
You're
ticket?
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Excuse me, I meant what is a winning Democratic platform? I don't want to get this into the candidates right now. Let's wait for a few more debates. But the platform. Today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club, we're reading from The Curse of Bigness, Antitrust in the New Gilded Age by Tim Wu. Sounds kind of a dry title, but it's a pretty amazing book. And it's a very small book. This is from the introduction. We are 4 decades into a major political and economic experiment. What happens when the United States and other major nations weaken their laws meant to control the size of industrial giants? What is the impact of allowing unrestricted growth of concentrated private power and abandoning most curbs on anti-competitive conduct? The answers, I think, are plain. We've managed to recreate both the economics and politics of a century ago, the first Gilded Age, and remain in grave danger of repeating more of the signature errors of the 20th century. As that era has taught us, extreme economic concentration yields gross inequality and material suffering, feeding an appetite for nationalist and extremist leadership. Yet, as if blind to the greatest lessons of the last century, we're going down the same path. If we learned one thing from the Gilded Age, it should have been this: the road to fascism and dictatorship is paved with failures of economic policy to serve the needs of the general public. Look at the global economy and witness the rule of concentrated oligopolies and monopolies in industries like finance, media, airlines, and telecommunications, just to name the most obvious. Firms whose size allows them to treat customers and competitors with impunity. Most visible in our daily lives is the great power of the tech platforms, especially Google, Facebook, and Amazon, who have gained extraordinary power over our lives. With this centralization of private power has come a renewed concentration of wealth and a widening gap between the rich and the poor. The concentration of wealth and power has helped transform and radicalize electoral politics. As in the Gilded Age, a disaffected and declining middle class has come to support radically anti-corporate and nationalist candidates, catering to a discontent that transcends party lines. A renewed economic nationalism around the world blames immigrant workers, foreign products, or elite conspiracies for the diminishment of the middle class. There is widespread anger at big business and how they treat customers, especially in concentrated or monopolized industries like insurance, pharmaceuticals, airlines, and other insensitive behemoths. Many fear Google, Amazon, and Facebook and their power over not just commerce, but over politics, the news, and our private information. What we must realize is that once again we face what Louis Brandeis called the curse of bigness, which, as he warned, represents a profound threat to democracy itself. What else can one say about a time when we simply accept that industry will have far greater influence over elections and lawmaking than mere citizens? When the American pharmaceutical industry can raise prices by thousands of %, confident the government will do little or nothing. When the middle class has no apparent influence on policies like health insurance, taxes, working conditions, housing, or other matters that determine how life is really lived. We must now face questions that have been ignored for more than a generation. Are extreme levels of industrial concentration actually compatible with the premise of rough equality among citizens, industrial freedom, or democracy itself? Can we create broad-based wealth and a sense of entrepreneurial opportunity in an economy dominated by monopolists? Is there just too much concentrated power in too few hands, with too much influence over government and our lives? The questions, I think, answer themselves. The main goal of this short volume is to see how the classic antidote to bigness, the antitrust and other anti-monopoly laws, might be recovered and updated to face the challenges of our times. For roughly a century, the antitrust law served in practice and theory as an anti-monopoly code that sought to limit excessive industrial concentration and to police monopoly conduct. By the midpoint of the last century, antitrust became widely understood in the Western world as a necessary part of a functioning democracy, as the ultimate check on private power. Yet over the span of a generation, the law has shrunk to a shadow of itself and somehow ceased to have a decisive opinion on the core concern of monopoly. The law that the Supreme Court once called a comprehensive charter of economic liberty aimed at preserving free and unfettered competition no longer condemns monopoly, but has grown ambivalent and sometimes even celebrates the monopolist, as if the anti and antitrust has been discarded. Most of what follows can be understood to center on the recovery of one principle, that in enacting and repeatedly fortifying the antitrust laws, the United States made a critical, indeed constitutional choice in industrial and national policy. After a period of intense national debate, including the presidential election in 1912, where economic policy was the central issue, the nation rejected a monopolized economy and chose repeatedly over the decades to preserve its tradition of an open and competitive marketplace. The goal of antitrust law must be understood as respecting that choice, or as Louis Brandeis, the great prophet of a decentralized economy, put it, the antitrust laws answered the question, shall the industrial policy of America be that of competition or that of monopoly? What happened? The law is currently suffering from an overindulgence in the ideas first popularized by Robert Bork and others at the University of Chicago in the 1970s. Bork contended implausibly that the Congress of 1890 exclusively intended the antitrust law to deal with one very narrow type of harm. The Curse of Bigness by Tim Wu.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, this rather modest question, what do Democrats want and what would be a winning platform? At the same time, though, we're facing, it's sort of like discussing what you're going to pick up at the store while your house is on fire. Professor Jason Stanley, Yale philosophy professor and the author of books including How Fascism Works and How Propaganda Works. You can read this story over at rawstoryrightnow.com. He said, and we're going to try and get him, he's been a guest on this program several times. I'm going to try and get him back on again. He said, I am not easily shocked. He's talking about last night's Trump rally. He says, I am not easily shocked, but we are facing an emergency. Journalists must not get away with sugarcoating this. This is the face of evil. This is the face of evil. When they are shouting, send her back, to an American citizen who is an elected member of the House of Representatives. When they're shouting, send her back. When they are shouting, send her back. Gene in Amory, Wisconsin. Hey, Gene, what's on your mind?
For your good work. I'm a priest, and the gospel this Sunday was on the Good Samaritan. And my homily played in, guess what direction, about an appropriate response to people who are trying to apply, not to sneak into the country, but to legitimately and legally apply for entry into the country. And, it's politicians and, a lot of the media try to make this a political issue. And it's not a political issue. It's a moral issue. Politicians do this all the time. They make abortion a political issue, gun control, the environment. They're making all these things political issues because that's their sphere of influence. These are not political issues. They're moral issues.
But it's the political system through which these issues become made into law or not made into law.
I think, you made my point better than I could, and thank you. Yeah. But this is the problem. Every issue is run through politicians, and you talk morality to these people, and they start searching for ships on the horizon.
Yeah. Excellent point, Gene. Excellent point. Thank you very much, Stephen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Stephen, what's up?
Hey, Tom, one of the things that I've found in the past few years is seems like a lot of working people are willing to cut off their nose to spite their face. I mean, these are people that don't really have a horse in the race. They're not paying high taxes. They don't own businesses, many of them. And yet they're willing to say, well, why should I let minorities come into this country and have benefits and stuff that I was given birthright to, and they won't come in here and they take over and take all these advantages that I had to be born here and worked hard to get. And they don't realize with that attitude, they're actually going to make social programs they need disappear.
Well, and not only that, a lot of social programs you do not have access to if you are not a documented U.S. citizen or somebody with a green card, things like that. Number one, most of your social welfare programs are simply unavailable to people who are not citizens of the United States.
But they don't realize that, Tom.
No, they don't. This Republican demagoguery goes way back. Excellent point, Stephen. Thank you, Rick in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Rick, what's up?
Yeah, I'm really concerned of where things are going with this country now. According to my local paper, they had a rally in Philadelphia called the Women for Trump, and according to the paper, there is over 1,000 people in this rally. And also, I understand there were several rallies throughout the country, but 1,000 people showed up for this. This is just.
I'm telling you, these are people who watch Fox News. They have been brainwashed.
Oh yeah. And I've been saying all along to all my friends, we're turning into a third world country, a fascist state, and this proves it. It reminds me, even small, is like the Jim Jones thing. How can these people just fall over with him? It's like he says jump, and they want to know how high. or how high do I need to please you? That seems to what it is to me.
Yeah, and don't ever underestimate the power of propaganda. I mean, this is what's going on here, and thank you very much, Rick. And it's not just the big lie. It's telling a blizzard of lies, a flurry of lies, and then maybe you rebut 1 or 2 out of 10, and that causes the other 10 or 9 or 10 to stand. That's what's going on right now. Michael in Ojai, California. Hey, Michael, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Tom, I know we have a lot of topics on the table, but there's been something that's been really concerning me, and I wonder if it's occurred to you. Change does not happen in a society until the comfort of the common man is really threatened. And I think what I have to bring on the table today might be that thing that puts us over the edge. I would like to refer your listenership to YouTube, and please look up Chinese social credit system. Particularly, there's a YouTube video called Exposing China's Digital Dystopian Dictatorship. And this will outline what's happening in China and how they're tracking their citizens through the ubiquitous use of cameras on the street. Well, we here in the United States, we are all addicted to our cell phones and our other media, and we have the advent of 5G Wi-Fi technology coming through. And I believe that the reason that Donald Trump is so friendly with worldwide despots like Putin and others is that they realize that they have a chance to control each and every individual on the planet by use of this new technology.
Yeah.
What is different about now and World War II is technology. And we must not forget that it was the Nazi regime that brought us computer technology in the first place. And it was IBM that went over to Germany and helped the Nazis organize their registry of Jews. There's a whole book about that was published back in the 90s. It was a New York Times bestseller. I really encourage people to look into the Chinese social credit system and put 2 and 2 together. Yeah. And realize that, I realize that we have so much to think about. For people who don't know what you're talking about, Michael, the social credit system has nothing to do with credit and very little to do with social. What it is you get basically bonus points for being a loyal Chinese citizen in exchange for certain behaviors, and you can have points deducted from you for other certain behaviors, and these are behaviors that support or don't support the political structure of the state. And that your social ranking as a consequence of how good a citizen you are, in quotes, will determine your job prospects, it'll determine your marriage prospects, it'll determine your ability to get into university. It pretty much determines the fate and future of your whole entire life and your family's life as well. Am I accurately characterizing this? You have absolutely accurately characterized it. Thank you. The goal of the system is to literally stop subversive people in place. In other words, limit their ability to make steps of any kind. That's right. The piece that I was referring to on YouTube does an expose about a Uyghur citizen in China. Yep. And it indicates how he literally cannot leave a 2-block radius of his home before his cell phone stops working, all his ATM cards stop working. He may not book any airline. He may not have any. Tom, this is what's coming down the pike. Yeah. And I realize that we all have way too much to think about with our current political reality here in this country, but we are well into the land of galloping fascism. Let me add something to this, Michael, and let me riff on this for a minute. I'm going to keep you on the line, and we can continue this conversation, you and I, about this for just a second here. I realize there's a whole bunch of people who want to jump in on other topics here, but this is in today's Washington Post. Massive expose by Jeffrey Fowler. He says, I've watched you check in for a flight and seen your doctor refilling a prescription. I've peeked inside corporate networks that reports on faulty rockets. If I wanted, I could have even opened a tax return you only shared with your accountant. I found your data online because it's for sale online. Even more terrifying, it's happening because of software you probably installed yourself. These are browser extensions that people put into Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Internet Explorer. Nearly half of all desktop web surfers have these browser extensions. And these browser extensions, in fact, I had an ad blocker browser extension on my Firefox.
And I went in this morning and I looked at it, and if you can click on permissions and see what permission it has permission to read every single piece of data on my computer. It has permission to read every single website I visit. And it turns out that they're actually collecting that information and they're selling it. And, he says, I heard from Sam Jelani, runs a website hosting business, and earlier this year found his clients' data on sale online. He found a website called Nacho Analytics. It's selling this stuff, $49 a month if you're a corporation, you want to sign up to this. He found usernames, passwords, GPS coordinates. From Dr. Kronos, a medical records service, we saw names of patients, doctors, and even medications. From another service called Cario, we saw patient names. From Southwest Airlines, we saw first and last names, confirmation numbers, people checking into flights. From United, we saw last names and passenger record numbers. From OneDrive, Microsoft's cloud storage service, we saw hundreds of documents named tax. We didn't open them to avoid further exposing sensitive data. Basically, and one of the people who commented on it said that he and his wife had this conversation about, gee, we ought to get a new mattress. And so they got in their car and they drove to 2 different mattress stores, didn't buy a mattress, went back home and went on the internet and just, looking at the news on the internet, and all of a sudden there's ads for mattresses popping up. Well, how did that happen? Turns out they were using phones that had Chrome browser, or that had the Android browsers. Android is owned by Google. Google sells the majority of the ads on the internet. By the time they got back from these mattress stores, apparently Google knew that they'd been at the mattress stores and started delivering mattress ads to them. I mean, this is the leading edge of the world that you're talking about, Michael. And when under the terms of service, for example, of the cloud services, whether it's from Apple, Microsoft, whatever it may be, read the terms of service. In most cases, it says we own the data that you put on our cloud, which means that they literally, this is why I will not use these cloud services. If I put up a manuscript I'm writing, they own it. I mean, this is where we're at. This is the corporate takeover. Now, you merge that with somebody like Donald Trump in the White House, and what do you have, Michael?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's why we should be concerned about antitrust laws, but we need to look at it differently. This is antitrust laws on steroids.
Yeah.
We live in an era, Tom, where technology can and will imprison us unless we take
as it has the
control
Chinese
of it and make sure that it sets us free. I am the person that called last week to advocate free and available education for every American citizen through use of computer technology. And I believe that this is the answer to our problems, that we must educate our populace. We must remove education from being an elite thing that only rich people can do.
Yeah, but we're wandering a field here. I'm concerned about the rise of fascism in this country. And what I saw last night, Michael, thank you for the call. What I saw last night with Donald Trump leading a chant, I mean, he didn't say it himself, but basically leading a chant of send her back, talking about Ilhan Omar. Number one, I think he's trying to get her killed. And number two, this is fascism. This is plain old straight up fascism.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And when you combine it with the massive amount of data that these online corporations have on you and me, an average of 5,000 data points on every single one of us, it's scary. And welcome back. Let's see here. Keith in Cantonsville, Maryland. Hey, Keith, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
How you doing, Tom? It's Catonsville.
Catonsville, okay. Thanks.
It's a little suburb just outside Baltimore. Now, I was responding to was it Tom Friedman?
Tom Friedman, yeah.
Yeah, Friedman, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the same old. You got to consider the source, you got to consider where it's coming from. They're still trying to paint the Democrats as being this huge swath of moderates, and I don't think they are.
I don't think the Democrats have been a huge swath of moderates ever. You go back and read Bill Clinton's stump speeches. And
you go back to the 90s when Clinton became president. I think they were just so gung-ho to have a Democrat back in office after 12 years of,
Bill Clinton's campaign, his stump speech was called the New Covenant speech. He gave that speech, hundreds of times all over the country when he was running in 92. And if you read that speech, it's a call for a return to the FDR values. But that's not how he governed. And the story, the official story is that after he got elected and just a few days before he was inaugurated, Larry Summers, the guy who then became the president of Harvard, Larry Summers, and
they gave him a little talking to
and Jamie
about,
Dimon, right? Jamie Dimon of Bank of America, I think it is, one of the big banks, Chase, whatever, sat him down and said, "Son, here's the facts of life."
Yeah, but see, what scares me is that, and I think you've mentioned it before on your show, is that whenever they try to project or say that Americans want something that they don't, meaning you have this small group of people determining the way this country is going to be governed, and it totally goes against what the majority of the people want. And I think you've said this before, bad things happen.
Right.
And what scares me is that going forward, the future is kind of being compressed because of things like climate change. So we don't even know if in the next 15 to 20 years, if we're going to be in something that's life or death with all this other stuff heaped on it. Just bad things can really happen really quickly because of that.
Yeah.
You're subjugating all these people financially and what have you, and then you have this huge loom of climate change sitting out there that has the capability of killing thousands of people.
It already is. It's already killing hundreds of thousands of people. It's displacing millions.
I realize that, but and that's just going to continue to encroach on our future, and that's what scares me. And what worries me more is when people get desperate.
Yeah.
That's what scares me.
Yeah.
But that's all I got to say.
Yeah. Well, desperation. Here's the thing, Keith. This was set up essentially. Reagan looked around, and there are a number of thinkers back in the 60s and 70s who were looking around, going, the middle class is too wealthy. Their kids are not, frightened. They're not, they're out there protesting. They're challenging the system. They're having too much sex. They're taking too many drugs. But most importantly, they're challenging us politically, and we can't have this. So what's the solution? Knock them down a notch or two. And that's what Reagan did.
But the problem is, just like they said in the movie Jurassic Park, people will find a way.
Yeah, there you go. Keith, thanks a lot for the call. And I appreciate it. And thanks for watching Free Speech TV. It's 9 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tom in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning. Tom Friedman, love him or hate him, suggested on Brian Williams last night that every time Trump has a rally, the Democrats ought to have a national telethon that raises money and registers people as a total pushback. What do you think?
Let me tell you what I did during the break at the bottom of the hour. I went to I Googled Ilhan Omar, and I found her campaign website, and I think it's, in fact, I probably still have it up. Let me see. Yeah, it's ilhanomar.com, ILHANOMAR.com, and I just donated some money to her. I mean, I don't know what else I can do to state support for her, but
I get it. But a big national thing with all of the Democrats, coming in on a few minutes and giving their pitch, raising money, just as an offsetting this idea. Also, a suggestion for later in the week that you might get people to reflect on where they were, what they were doing during the moonwalk, the first moonwalk.
Which was, in my case, 50 years ago today, right?
Yeah. In my case, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Iran, and I was checking into a hotel, and it was late at night, and the Kurdistan part of Iran, and and I had been traveling, and the hotel manager said, I thought it was too late to have dinner. He said, no, I'm going to have dinner for you in the garden. And he said, it's an honor for you. It's an honor for us to have you Americans here tonight with us. And I said, what? What's that about? And he said, he pointed to the moon, and he said, you're walking up there.
Wow.
You Americans are walking up there.
Wow.
And I didn't realize it because I'd been traveling. There it was.
So this was on this day in 1969, as I recall, right?
50 years ago this month, I was married in Tehran, and we served there. And but I'll never forget that. That's when I first realized that we were walking on the moon. I love the fact that
amazing story.
After that happened, we sent those astronauts around the world, and many people said, "Not you Americans were walking on it. We humans were walking on the moon."
Yeah, there you go. Tom, thank you for the call. Great points all. Linda in Coconut Creek, Florida. Hey, Linda, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to thank you for promoting Canada because they are really, really nice people. They do come down here every year. They spend that money. They keep asking me as their letter carrier, why do you guys keep voting them in? And I said, it's complicated. I try to, because the Canadian politics are different from American politics. But she said, he's several. He's no good. I said, well, there are some of us that know what he is, but there are many of us that do not know what they are, and they don't care. Mm-hmm. And, it's the ones that don't care are the ones that don't have anything to lose. It's the ones that have stuff to lose, like you, like me, like people who have saved we've done everything right, Tom. We went to work, we saved our taxes, we're saving for our retirement, and then you have the guy that was unable to save because he had a disability or something. Bad things happen to people. It just does. And these Americans, they roll into town. They've got those beautiful $80,000 GMCs. They've got the $30,000 Harleys. These are middle-class Canadians. They live beautiful. They have the $110,000 beautiful mobile home. They're living a grand life, $80,000 boat.
And these are not, by the way, doctors and lawyers. These are average working people in Canada. And by the way, I remember, in the 60s and 70s, the people in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and my dad bought the house that we lived in. I mean, it was 4 boys, myself, my 3 brothers, my dad and mom. The 6 of us living in a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. He bought that house for $13,000 in 1956, and at least. I can think on my block, on the block that I lived on, there were 2 other families who lived on that block, and all the houses were the same. This was a tract housing, right? They were all made by the same developer, all roughly the same price. There were 2 families on that block that had literally vacation homes up on Houghton Lake in northern Michigan. And how did they do that? They worked at General Motors. They worked on the assembly line.
My 2 neighbors, my 2 closest neighbors. One, he worked in insurance, and the other one, she had her own business. And they both told me, they said, we saved, we did everything right, we don't have to worry about health care. Our kids went to college for free, so we didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
And you just sit there and you bang your head, and you're like,
oh, you're talking about your Canadian neighbors.
Yeah, my Canadian neighbors.
The Canadian neighbors,
wonderful.
Yeah. Because this is no longer the American story. This was the American story in the 60s. This was the American story in the 70s. And this was the American story in the first probably half of the 80s as Reagan destroyed the American middle class, the American labor movement, just froze the minimum wage. It just wiped us out. But this was the American story before Reagan. And now it's, as you correctly point out, Linda, now it's the Canadian story. One of my kids married a person who is now a U.S. citizen, but his family is all in Canada. In fact, they got married in Canada. And it's just mind-boggling. The life of middle-class Canadians is really good. And the life of middle-class Americans, no, it's struggle. Linda, thank you for the call. And thanks for being a letter carrier. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon: War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon, but why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other, one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario, for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea, might play out. The adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, to obtain terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appeared in the headlines every week. Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Democratic Party, and sometimes, in the case of the legal groups on the right, tracked the Republican platform. Moreover, the investigation advanced the company's bottom lines. Fixed by Thom Hartmann here with you, and boy, what a day! The news is breaking right now. I mentioned yesterday that when Donald Trump and Michael Cohen engaged in a criminal conspiracy, it was a criminal conspiracy. And the way that you know it's a criminal conspiracy is because Michael Cohen is sitting in jail right now for having engaged in it. When Donald Trump and Michael Cohen engaged in a criminal conspiracy to conceal from the American public that he had had two affairs with women right after his wife gave birth to his most recent child, or in the year after. And one of those affairs lasted for, according to Karen McDougal, a year. That when he and Michael Cohen decided to pay these women off, it happened the day after the Access Hollywood tape went public. This is when they started it. The reports literally are out right now. Access Hollywood goes out. This was like October 8th, I believe it was. The next day, I think it was October 9th, Donald Trump and Michael Cohen are on the phone saying, we've got to pay these women off. Now, that's a crime. It's a violation of campaign finance law to use your money to help your campaign. And also it's a cover-up. It's a massive cover-up. And frankly, I don't think Trump would be president right now if he had not committed this crime. So you've got a guy in the White House who's there as the result of a criminal conspiracy, of multiple criminal conspiracies, frankly. I mean, the Mueller report documents a whole bunch of others that involve foreign governments, and not just Russia, by the way. But this is, Trump gets on the phone, and then Trump and Hope Hicks and Michael Cohen get on the phone and are working this thing out. And then Trump and David Pecker, who was the guy who owned, who was the CEO of American Media, which AMI, which is the company that publishes the National Enquirer, they had been the intermediary with Karen McDougal in the catch and kill story, saying to Karen McDougal, here, take $130,000 plus you get to be a writer for the magazine or for the newspaper. So Before it started, well, there was a series of like 5 phone calls. This is all in the documents that were released by this judge yesterday. The judge was so pissed off because Bill Barr decided that he was not going to prosecute Donald Trump and he was not going to prosecute the Trump organization. And in fact, as soon as Bill Barr came into office, the feds, the Justice Department, had actually subpoenaed the Trump organization for their records on this stuff. And Bill Barr stopped the investigation, along with stopping 7 other investigations that Mueller had initiated into things that had to do with the whole Russia scandal. Bill Barr is like, the master cover-up artist here. So we have that. And, continuing our conversation over the last hour, in my opinion, I think, frankly, Donald Trump is trying to get Ilhan Omar killed. I can't come to any other conclusion. This is, the guy who wrote the book on how fascism works has just come out and said, this is an emergency. His name is Jason Stanley. He's a professor at Yale. He wrote a book called How Fascism Works. And he said, I am not easily shocked, but after this, sender back rant last night, I am not easily shocked, but we are facing an emergency. Journalists must not get away with sugarcoating this. This is the face of evil. So how does American democracy get deconstructed if Donald Trump wins? How does it get taken apart? Turns out there's an actual project to do this. It's been funded by a bunch of right-wing billionaires. In fact, the guy in charge of it, the guy who's largely in charge of it, his name is Eric O'Keefe, according to sourcewatch.org, quote, has deep ties to Charles and David Koch and has been a founder and funder of numerous right-wing groups, including Wisconsin Club for Growth, through its Convention of States project, and that's what I'm talking about here. They are pushing for a constitutional convention in order to severely restrict federal power, for example, by redefining the Commerce Clause to prohibit Congress from passing child labor or anti-discrimination laws, or by adding a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. This, and it's not just the balanced budget amendment. Here's where this is at. This is like from Wikipedia. In December 2013, nearly 100 legislators from 32 states met at Mount Vernon to talk about how to call a convention. This is a constitutional convention to rewrite our Constitution so that our Constitution works for the billionaires, but no longer works for the rest of us. In February 2014, U.S. Senator Tom Coburn announced after his retirement from Congress he would focus on promoting the Convention of States to state legislatures. In December 2015, Marco Rubio endorsed it, the call for an Article 5 convention. In January 2016, Texas Governor Greg Abbott called for a Convention of States to restrict the power of federal government. In September 2016, CSG held a simulated convention to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution in Williamsburg, Virginia. An assembly of 137 delegates representing every state gathered to conduct a simulated convention. These guys are practicing. They have been rehearsing this since 2013. The simulated convention passed amendments relating to 6 topics, including requiring the states to approve any increase in the national debt, imposing, in other words, if you have a national emergency, our national debt went to 120% of GDP as a result of World War II. We would not have been able to fight World War II if every state had to pass a resolution or had to pass legislation saying, yes, raise the national debt. Literally would not have been able to fight World War II. We wouldn't have been able to get out of the Great Depression. After World War II, we were, in the tail end of the Great Depression, and Dwight Eisenhower increased our national debt to build the national highway system, which stimulated the economy and continues to this day. Paid for itself 100 times over. The GI Bill, for every dollar we spent sending young men to, mostly men, this is returning GIs from World War II, to college, we got $7 in additional tax revenue back, but it required deficit spending. But, oh no, we can't have that, right? Restricting back to this thing. Requiring the states to approve any increase in the national debt, imposing term limits. What do term limits do? They do away with the institutional memory of legislative bodies and replace it with the lobbyists as the institutional memory. This is why I'm on the FreedomWorks newsletter. This is why FreedomWorks has been pounding on this. Oh, we have to have term limits. You don't want legislators who've been in office for a decade or more, who know where the bodies are buried, who know how laws are passed, who know who's good and who's bad, who know who you can trust and who you can't. You don't want them around. You want new legislators to have to go to lobbyists, corporate lobbyists, and ask them how things work here, because the lobbyists have been there for 20, 30 years. No term limits on lobbyists. We, by the way, do have term limits. They're called elections. Restrict the scope of the Commerce Clause to limit the power of federal regulations. In other words, block the ability of the EPA to develop new regulations, block the ability of basically all these agencies, require a supermajority to impose federal taxes. In other words, 2/3 of Congress in both houses. Repeal the 16th Amendment. That's ending the income tax. The 16th Amendment established the income tax. Repeal the income tax. Again, I'm telling you, this is all about the billionaires. And giving the states the power to abrogate any federal law, regulation, or executive order. So a state can say, like Louisiana can say, well, hey, the Koch brothers want to build a refinery down here and just pollute the crap out of Louisiana, and they're going to pay off all the politicians down here. So, even though the federal law says that there's limits on how much pollution and poison they can put in our air, we're going to let them do it anyway. The Convention of States websites notes that as of 2019, 15 states had signed on. They need 38. To literally change the Constitution, top to bottom. They need 34 to start the process. Well, here's where we're at right now. This started in March of 2014 when Georgia signed on. They were the first state. That year, it was Georgia, Alaska, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Indiana, Oklahoma, and Louisiana in 2014. Since Trump took over the White House, they have added Arizona, North Dakota, Texas, and Missouri. Just in the first 3 months of this year, Arkansas, Utah, and Mississippi. The states where one chamber of the state legislature has passed this so far, Arizona, North Dakota, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, Utah, and Mississippi. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the list I just read that has been added since Trump took the White House. The ones where one chamber has passed it are New Mexico, Mississippi, Iowa, South Dakota, Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, and New Hampshire. And now, according to the Convention of States website, this year they're working to bring in Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, North Dakota, West Virginia, Illinois, and Hawaii. Now, that's 40 states. They only need 34 to start the process, 38 to pass it. Arnold Toynbee said, when the last man who remembers the horrors of the last great war dies, the next great war becomes inevitable. I would update that to say when the last American who remembers how quickly democratic constitutions were replaced in Europe in the 1930s dies, the replacement of democracy in America becomes inevitable. This is the agenda. And they're quite proud of it. They're quite proud of it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to rewrite the U.S. Constitution. And what's going to happen to your Fourth Amendment right of privacy? What's going to happen to your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination? What's going to happen to your First Amendment right of free speech? I think you know where it's going to go when the billionaires decide to rewrite our Constitution. This is how a Trojan horse project to rewrite our Constitution could actually happen if Trump wins in 2020. You can find it, by the way, over at alternet.org and Raw Story and other places.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's over on Common Dreams. It's on a bunch of websites right now. Check it out. We'll be back with your calls in just a minute. And welcome back. Boy, what a day. Frank in Thompson Falls, Montana. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind today?
Oh, I'm just thoroughly disgusted with the guy that's in the presidency of the White House. I mean, I look at him like Mussolini when he sits there and basks in his glory when he's in the middle of his rallies. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, Mussolini was the same kind of pathetic egomaniac.
Right.
But the difference is that Mussolini was a hell of a lot smarter.
Well, and the deal that gets me is I just moved to Montana from Washington about a year ago, and over here, you can't say any. In fact, I had a guy tell me last week, he says, you're in Sanders County, you better watch what you say, and all I did was say that I didn't appreciate Trump as a president. And
Wow.
it was like, holy cow. And, and the deal here is everybody carries firearms.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, where are we going to? I mean, it's as long as it's God, guns, and country, then you're fine. And if you deviate from that, then I mean, it's like if you say the word liberal, they're like freaking out. And I said, well, I'm not a liberal. I'm an American. I try to look at things on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
But over here, they don't.
Yeah, that's not going to wash with your well-brainwashed Fox viewers, tragically. Thanks a lot for the call. Dorothy in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Dorothy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wondered if you could talk about what happened late last night where the House voted down Al Green's resolution to impeach.
You know, I agree with voting it down. You don't jump right into impeachment until the American people are behind you and you have a majority of Congress willing to consider it. That was not a resolution for an investigation into Trump, which is what has to happen first. You remember back in 1973, Peter Rodino was the head of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives, and a resolution was passed to open an impeachment hearing. And Rodino's committee was the one that came up with the articles of impeachment against Nixon. That Barry Goldwater walked over to the White House and said, this is going to drop in the Senate next week, and we are prepared to impeach you. And that's why Nixon resigned. So, Al Green was, in a way, doing a stunt. And in a way, adding some, I think, good visibility to the issue. But it got a lot more publicity, frankly, than it deserved.
Do a lot of these resolutions go that way where somebody introduces something? I heard somebody on MSNBC last night opine that his resolution didn't include enough of what Trump has done badly here with the obstruction and the...
Well, that's why you need to have an investigation. I mean, it's like with these campaign finance violations. It's quite clear now, not only that Bill Barr was trying to play cover-up artist for Trump, this federal judge foiled him and said, no, you've got to release these documents, but that Donald Trump himself, along with Hope Hicks and David Pecker and Michael Cohen, engaged in a criminal conspiracy to violate campaign finance laws and to basically steal an election, to conceal from the American public, behavior that he'd been engaging in, probably his whole entire life, and pay off Stormy Daniels and pay off Karen McDougal to keep them quiet right after the Access Hollywood tape came out. I don't think he'd be president if he hadn't engaged in that criminal conspiracy. And it is a criminal conspiracy. And the proof of it is the fact that Michael Cohen is sitting in jail right now, in part because of his, paying off those two women. And, that's the kind of stuff that, and that's the least of it, frankly, in my opinion. That's the kind of stuff that the American public needs to know in a big way about how criminal this man is in the White House, the head of the Trump crime family. Thanks a lot, Dorothy, for your call. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just looking again at the swamp here. You've got the Environmental Protection Agency being run by a coal lobbyist. You've got the Interior Department being run by an oil lobbyist. You've got the guy who's up to become Secretary of Defense, a Raytheon lobbyist, who, by the way, Raytheon's going to pay $1 million to this year in deferred compensation. This is the definition of Teapot Dome, back in the day, right? I think it was 1923. I could have the year wrong, but back in the mid-1920s when Calvin Coolidge was president, so I guess it must have been 25 or thereabouts. In any case, Coolidge was president, and his Secretary of the Navy, Albert Fell, as I recall, maybe it was Albert Fall, was being spiffed by a lobbyist for the gas industry to take Teapot Dome, which was this gas storage facility and gas facility, and as I recall, it was in Wyoming. Basically, it was a corruption scandal. It nearly took down a presidential administration. People talked about it for 50 years. Teapot Dome, you still know what it is. This is because of this kind of corruption. And here we have this Gabe Ortiz writing over Daily Kos, the head of a nonprofit. This is a nonprofit organization that runs the children's prisons. It's called Southwest, and the CEO is Southwest Key. Excuse me, like key, like we're going to lock you in with a key. The CEO is his name is Juan Sanchez. His salary last year was $3.6 million. It's a nonprofit, right? This is crazy. 5 other top executives earn more than $1 million a year, locking up children in cages and saying, we don't even have enough money. This is Trump's pitch, right, at his rallies. And the sleazeballs who go on Fox News and whatnot saying, oh yeah, this is all the Democrats' fault. Mike Pence down there, wearing his alt-right uniform, his khaki pants and his polo shirt, along with a bunch of his buddies wearing khaki pants and polo shirts as they're looking at Hispanic men in a cage and saying, well, it's the Democrats' fault that we don't have enough money for this. We're paying $720 a day per person to house these people, to these corporations. And what are they doing? Well, Sanchez's wife, the CEO of this company, she took $500,000. The CFO of the company took $2.4 million. Child detention has turned into a $1 billion industry. This one company has a $460 million contract just to house children. Oh, but we can't afford soap. And so, so we dutifully pass legislation giving them $5 more billion. And this is the guy who campaigns saying, I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to clean up corruption in Washington, D.C. Don't you know the system's rigged? Don't you know the lobbyists are running everything? Donald Trump running pretty much as a Democrat saying, I'm going to make sure that you have a better health care program than Obamacare. I'm going to make sure that you have the right to have a decent wage. I'm going to bring jobs back from overseas. We've lost, by the way, according to the Commerce Department that certifies this, we've lost 200,000 jobs to overseas manufacturing since Trump came in. His his tax cut gives corporations a 50% increase in their tax deduction if they move factories overseas. That's built right into Trump's tax cuts. A tax cut, the 83% of which went to the top 1%. A $1.5 trillion giveaway that was not funded. It was entirely borrowed. And then Rand Paul and Mike Lee come out yesterday and say, we can't put a couple $1 million into this 9/11 responders fund as these people are getting really, really sick and dying. We can't fund this because it's not paid for. We didn't cut a social program somewhere to pay for this. We didn't cut food stamps to pay for this. We didn't cut education to pay for this, so we're not going to do this. Rand Paul and Mike Lee, a couple of these slimy Republicans.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll pick up your thoughts on this after the break. Stick around. Today we're reading The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence by Michael D'Antonio. This is from the first chapter. For decades, Pence had presented himself as a humble servant who could be entrusted with power because he was at heart a mild-mannered Midwesterner. Friends and foes alike said his major character trait was extreme niceness. When given the opportunity, Pence described himself as a true Hoosier, son of Indiana, who was a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. This is how he had introduced himself to the country at the Republican National Convention 6 months earlier. The list contrasted with the usual pledge politicians make to put country first. This is what President Obama did after the 2016 election, when he said, "We are not Democrats first, we are not Republicans first, we are Americans first." The vice president's self-declared identity revealed both his priorities and the source of his power. For 30 years, he had helped lead the Republican Party into a closer alliance with preachers who were turning evangelical Christianity from a religion into a political crusade that engaged in a culture war with non-believers. The aim of many was to destroy abortion rights, roll back the equality gained by gay citizens, and prepare the nation for the second coming of Christ. Pence and others used martial metaphors and considered themselves warriors of the Christian right, both besieged and called upon to fight. Quote, "Those who would have us ignore the battle being fought over life, marriage, and religious liberty have forgotten the lessons of history," said Pence in 2010. "America's darkest moments have come when economic arguments trumped moral principles." Pence's allies in his war included hugely wealthy donors who, despite their vast wealth accumulated at a time of historic inequality, also posed as victims. As libertarians in the mold of Ayn Rand's cardboard characters, they felt inhibited in the pursuit of even greater riches by a government that imposed foolish regulations and would redistribute their wealth to the supposedly indolent poor. Starting with this perspective, they denied the science behind environmental protection, demanded tax cuts for themselves, and insisted on massive reductions in programs serving anyone who wasn't rich. The victimhood claimed by both the libertarians and the Christian right permitted the construction of an alternative reality that denied their own power and masked their ambition to make politics and culture conform to an ideology that included white Christian supremacy and predatory capitalism. It also denied the progress they had made in their construction of their own political might. With his oath of office, Vice President Pence became both the free marketer's hero and the most successful Christian supremacist in American history. Most of Pence's life had been preparation for this moment, and possibly one more. His lifelong goal, set when he was a boy, was the Oval Office itself. Remarkably, he had reached this point by tying his fate to Donald J. Trump, a man whose immorality in the form of lying, cheating, and deceiving in every aspect of his life, from his marriage to his businesses, had made him a living exemplar of everything that Christianity and conservatism abhorred. However, this record also suggested that Pence was more likely to assume the highest office in the land than most vice presidents who had come before. To put it bluntly, Trump was vulnerable to impeachment. If this occurred, Pence would see the hand of God at work in his elevation to the presidency. In the meantime, he would wait and watch. On Inauguration Day, with Pence looking on, a slightly stooped Donald Trump stepped forward when it was his turn to face the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts. Beside Trump stood his wife, Melania, the former fashion model, who held two Bibles, Lincoln's and Trump's own. At the stroke of noon, the president-elect raised his right hand and placed his left on the Bibles. As he did this, Trump's family members and hundreds of political and government figures strained to see the moment. Trump and Pence were a study in contrast. At age 58, Pence appeared trim, perhaps even athletic, and could have passed for a man 10 years younger. His jacket was neatly buttoned, his hands were clasped at his waist, and his smooth face was set in a half smile. Mere feet away, in some, he resembled a small-town pastor, or maybe even a funeral director. Mere feet away, a stern-faced 70-year-old Trump stood with his coat hanging open like a caftan to reveal a long red necktie. Despite much cosmetic intervention, he looked old and tired. At the conclusion of the presidential oath, which had been voiced by 44 presidents before him, Trump said the words, "So help me God," and accepted the congratulations of those closest to him with a thin-lipped, toothless grin. He then delivered a 15-minute speech replete with distortions and falsehoods that were his trademark. He declared that America was awash with crime and despair and under constant attack. "This American carnage stops right here and stops right now," said Trump. It was the most remembered phrase of the address. "That was some weird S-word," former President George W. Bush was heard to remark as he left the inaugural stand. Weird was the mildest word that one could attach to the 45th President of the United States as he launched an administration that would be stained by scandal and corruption so broad it defied a citizen's ability to grasp. Cronyism, secrecy, and nepotism would flourish. Presidential lies, daily cataloged by the Washington Post and others, would come at the rate of more than 150 per month. From the moment of his oath, Mike Pence, the vice president, faced the historic, some would say daunting, challenge of dealing with an erratic and undisciplined commander-in-chief. The book, The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 34 minutes past the hour. A Trojan horse project to rewrite our Constitution. Fat cats getting rich, taking millions of dollars in salaries, locking children up in jails without even soap. I mean, how much more corrupt does this administration have to get? The Democrats, by the way, just passed legislation to give millions of Americans a raise. It will be blocked by the Republicans. This is the longest period we've gone without a raise in the minimum wage since the minimum wage was put into place by Franklin Roosevelt back in the 1930s over loud screams of socialism from the Republicans. Anyhow, let's pick up your phone calls. Oh, I see Kyle, our Republican troll, is on the line. Hey, Kyle, what's on your mind today?
Nice intro there. I was calling in response to a caller earlier who brought up a point that gets brought up regularly of why people vote against their interests. And recently I've kind of thought of why I think from our side that would be the case. And really what it comes down to is most working class people don't have a huge surplus in their budget and are making all these decisions on what to pay for. And
right. So doesn't it really piss you off, Kyle, that the Republicans are doing everything they can to destroy a healthcare system that might be less expensive and replace it with something that's more expensive, and that if you get sick, you're guaranteed to get thrown off your insurance and you're guaranteed to get hit with giant deductibles? Doesn't it piss you off that they have deregulated the banks so that they can rob you? They can jack your insurance, your interest rates as high as almost 30%. Doesn't it upset you that the Republicans fight every effort by working people to organize into unions so that they can have better pay? Doesn't it upset you that they fight any increase in the minimum wage? I mean, all these things that hit working people in the United States, the Republicans all say, screw you, Kyle. They're saying, we're here for the billionaires. They pay our paycheck.
I have a two-part answer of why I think, why it's against the interest, that you guys see it that way. I hope I can get to it. I'm not trying to troll you. But it's as long as people are having a hard time making all their bills, and at the same point in time, one of their biggest bills is paying taxes. And then I'm going to get to the second part, which ties right into it, is that, I'm a carpenter, self-employed.
Kyle, you want to see your taxes go down?
No, just
go back to the tax rates we had before Ronald Reagan cut the top tax rate from 91% down to 25% for billionaires. What Reagan raised tax rates on working people 18 times. Taxes have gone up massively on working people, mostly under Republican administrations over the years, while they've gone down on the really rich. If you're concerned about your tax bill and you're making less than $400,000 a year, you need to be talking to the Republicans, not the Democrats, Kyle.
Okay, let me make my second point. Democrats have had lots of chances to implement their plan, but let me make my second point is that I and every other contractor I know in the area, and with the internet, you talk to contractors from all around the country, you literally can't find new people to enter the trades. And at the same point in time, there's other people who can't cut. You can make $25 an hour if you just get up to speed in a year or two.
Right.
And you can't find people to fill those jobs. But also the talking points here constantly are, people can't make their bills. People can't make their bills. They need this program, this program, this program. Well, let's start at first before we say people can't cover their expenses by filling the jobs.
Kyle, are you telling me? Hang on just a second here, Kyle. I mean, we recently had our call screener went back to college, and she was a teacher and she wanted to get her master's degree. She went back to college. She couldn't afford to be a teacher, so she came here to be a call screener. Anyhow, she went back, and so we had to hire a new call screener. And we're paying $15 an hour. It's a part-time job. It's 3 hours a day, right? It's really 4 hours a day. And we put an ad in the local paper, and Portland's a fairly expensive labor market, much like Chicago is, and we probably got 100 people applying for that job. Are you telling me that you're offering $25 an hour and you can't get people to come to work for you?
In my area, it starts off, if you are unskilled but you'll labor, you'll get $15, $16, maybe $18 an hour. If you get up to speed, you can make 25 to 40. I mean, 40 is if you're up to speed and good. But it happens time and time again. You get people, they get in, they'll start, they'll work for a while. Some of them will quit literally in a day or two. But as soon as it's like, okay, today we have to go, like, get this work done in an attic, and it's, 80 degrees, 90 degrees. It's hot in the attic. It really sucks. It's always you get to a job where it's like you get to the space, okay, we got to work in the crawl space. We've got to, and eventually they all leave. And
well, why don't you pay them hazardous duty pay and charge your clients more money for it?
Well, I mean,
if you want me to work in a crawl space, I'm going to charge you an extra $10 an hour because I'm going to have to pay that $10 an hour to my employees.
Well, it is.
But what does this have to do with Donald Trump, Kyle, and why you'd vote for him?
The point is, you were talking about what the platform should be, and everything is let's cover cost of families here, let's cover cost of families here to get back in the office. Well, the point is there's a whole bunch of us out there who are like, well, let's at least make sure all these positions are filled before we start covering expenses of people who say they can't afford it. There's jobs out there, and people won't fill them. So it's going to be really hard to say, okay, let's take...
Kyle, there's not an American out there, I mean, setting aside the 2 or 3% of people who are mentally ill and chronically homeless and things like that, basically there is not an American out there who won't do a job if they're appropriately paid. When John McCain was complaining about this back in the day, this was like 10 years ago or so, I was doing this show at the time, and he came out and he said, we could be paying $50 an hour to people to pick lettuce in Arizona out in the fields, and nobody would do the job. He had over 10,000 actual job applications, people willing to move to Arizona from all over the country to pick lettuce for $50 an hour. And that's hard, brutal work.
Talk to some contractors that you know and trust, so it's not me, the Republican troll, and see that's the problem. You raise your price. Next thing you know, you're not getting the job. So you get in this weird spot of, I can't get help if I raise your price too much, now you're not competitive. So you're stuck. No, talk to people that aren't me. You can't fill these jobs. You'd have to hire probably 10 guys if you wanted to have a good one.
Kyle, I'm not your business consultant, but I still don't understand what that has to do with why you would vote for Trump.
Because all of your ideas for the platform for Democrats were, let's cover college costs, let's cover medical costs, let's cover this.
Right, Canada can do it. Why can't we, Kyle?
Is Canada better? Is that a better spot to live? Is Canada?
Yeah, people live longer in Canada. They have a longer lifespan than we do. Children are less likely to die in Canada. They have lower infant mortality. Mothers in childbirth are less likely to die. They have lower maternal mortality. They have virtually every index of health is better in Canada. They have less mental illness. They have these are all the symptoms of a healthcare system and a culture and a society in collapse. They have a fraction of the poverty. Do you realize, Kyle, that 1 out of 5 American children goes to bed hungry at least one night a month?
And I have huge sympathy to any child.
And that's not happening in Canada at all.
And
why can't we afford to be like Canada? Because we've got billionaires who are sucking all the cream off the top and telling the rest of us we should fight with each other.
Okay, so I've been to Belize on a tour, and the tour guide says they make fun of America. And this is a black person making fun of America, that if you don't work in Belize, you don't eat. And it's on a tour, and they're making fun, not making fun, but they're making the point to us of like, yeah, you guys come from a country where you can...
What happened to our conversation about Canada? Now we're talking about Belize?
I don't know why Canada can do it, but I'll tell you this.
I can tell you why Canada can do it. They can do it the same reason Denmark can do it, the same reason Norway can do it, the same reason Sweden can do it, the same reason Germany can do it, the same reason France can do it, the same reason the United Kingdom can do it, the same reason Hungary, the same reason Bulgaria, for God's sake, can do it, because they're civilized countries, they're developed countries who are not controlled by their billionaires. They're controlled by right-wing billionaires. They are controlled by their people. Every developed country in the world, every developed country in the world offers college education in a way that you don't have to graduate with massive student debt unless you want to go to an elite college. And every developed country in the world offers health care to all of their citizens in a way that nobody goes bankrupt for being sick. And last year in the United States of America, 600,000 families went bankrupt because somebody got sick. The number of medical bankruptcies in Canada last year, 0. The number of medical bankruptcies in Germany last year, 0. The number of medical bankruptcies in France last year, 0. What's our problem? We've got Donald Trump and the Republican Party, Kyle. That's our problem.
I'll make a challenge to you. Invite Jordan Peterson on your show and ask him why Canada.
I have no idea who that is, and I'm not, I'm not inviting anybody on my show. Thank you. Horatio in Los Angeles. Hey, what's up?
San Diego, California.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah, Tom, can somebody tell this president, so-called president, that he is the commander-in-chief and our military is made out of minorities? And if he wants us to fight Iran, some of these minorities are going to be fighting, worried that their parents may be deported because they were waiting for their time to go to court.
Trump has already deported a number of veterans.
Yeah, but again, but he's going to want us to go fight for it. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I'm just saying that he forgot that he is the commander-in-chief of a minority military, and I wish somebody would explain it to them.
Have you been in the military, Horatio?
Huh?
Have you been in the military?
No, but my brother came back from the first Iraq War, and boy, he was never the same. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't talk. He's barely talking now, but that thing. Can I say something about the 4 women?
Yeah, you got about 15 seconds. Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of seeing our minority sisters having to apologize to a bloated white man. So, no, I'm with them 100%. And when is Israel going to apologize for the 35 sailors that they killed? When is Israel going to?
Yeah, let's not turn this into an Israel screed here. Horatio, I'm sorry, you had me there for a minute, but the United States of America, this is us. This is us, and Trump is our problem. Netanyahu is Israel's problem. Let them deal with him. But I agree with you. I am a fan of the squad, and yes, this bloated orange. So anyhow, we'll be back. It's 15 minutes before the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be checking in with Talk Media News in about 4 minutes. Stick around. And welcome back. Dell in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hey, Dell, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. First time calling in. I just happened to be flipping through channels. This so-called president, I call him Dump Truck.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize that when he says send her back, is he talking about Melania and her parents?
Melania.
And relatives Melania?
Yeah.
That came over on his arm?
Right, or his first wife, Ivana. I mean, 2 out of 3 of his wives have been immigrants. So, for that matter, Ivanka, Donald Trump Jr., and Eric are all the children of an immigrant, right? Should they go back too? Should they go back to the country their mother came from?
Yeah, they should.
Well, I don't think so.
Caucasian.
I don't think they should. I think that Donald Trump needs to stop talking like this, and I think the Republican Party needs to stop enabling conversations like this. But I get your point.
He's an embarrassment to this country and the people who served before him, the people in the military. He is just. He's out there.
Yeah, Corporal Bone Spurs. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Dumb, and for being such good Christians, they don't act the part.
Yeah, amen. Del, thank you. Clifford in Altadena, California. Is that? Do I have that right, Clifford?
Yeah. How you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
First time caller.
Thank you,
Tom. I'm 72 years old, and I'm a black man, but I'm an independent voter and thinker. Why is it Donald Trump runs around the country saying how great the economy is, and it's good. Now look, it's good, but the credit should go just as much to Barack Obama. He inherited a mess. Matter of fact, I remember Ford Motor Company CEO Ford didn't even want the money to help him get out of the jam. Said President Obama saved the automobile company industry. President Obama does not get credit for nothing. What is wrong? He said, I seen foreign leaders say, President Obama saved the world economy, and he doesn't get credit.
We had the Obama recovery, yeah.
And
in fact, by the way, there have been no months or no quarters so far where Trump's numbers have yet achieved, depending on what pretty much any metric you want to use except on the unemployment rate, where Trump's numbers have not achieved the peak Obama numbers.
Yeah, Tom, Tom, what has happened to this country? I don't even recognize America.
Yeah, I know. It's I think what's coming out, Clifford, is what was always there, but was kind of under the rug, and we peeled the rug back, and out came Trump, and out came all his white racist buddies, and now we're getting to see the dirt under the rug. I mean, basically, but the problem is that as they go public in a big way like this, they also go evangelical. This, Trump is indoctrinating a whole new generation of young people who are going to become, the Hitler Youth. They're going to become the next fascists, and we're already seeing it in all these movements, these right-wing movements.
Yeah, I'm stunned. I served my country 8 years in the United States Air Force. I sometimes sit up and cry. And Rush Limbaugh, the Utah senator that just got
Mike Lee.
Romney. They didn't serve.
Romney. Yeah. No. It's they're all these chicken hawks. Clifford, I got to run, but thank you for the call. You said it very well. We'll be right back. It's time for Talk Media News. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you 10 minutes before the hour. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do. New book by Ellen Ratner. On the line with us is Bob Ney, the author of Sideswipe, former congressman from Ohio. Bob, what's going on in the world that we need to know about? I'm guessing at the top of your list are the revelations of the criminal conspiracy that was engaged in between Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, Hope Hicks, and David Pecker.
Well, I actually have that. I did want to get to a piece of bright news, though. Okay. Although some people may say, well, what did they do this for? But the minimum wage was increased and indexed in a House bill, which passed 231 to 199. The bill actually was around, Tom, around March or April, but then they were having some trouble with some moderates in the House Democratic Caucus, but they solved, all the problems with it. And the reason I started out, some people say, well, why do it? It's not going to pass the Senate. But here's the point to it. And I've seen this before in my time in the House. Look, it doesn't matter what the Senate will do or will not do on this. If the House passes it, first of all, it's a working person's agenda, and they've actually done something to be able to say, look, we've done this.
This is the Democrats in the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Yes, Democrats in the House. Because a lot of people say, well, what's the use of doing it? Well, there is a use to it. First of all, they would be promoting a working person's agenda. It would take it up by 2025 to $15 an hour, and it would be indexed after that to a certain wage continuing on. And the other thing is that if they pass this now and then they are successful in retaking the Senate, it should be made a point that it's that much easier on the opening day to do this again. So things they do this year, whether they pass the Senate or not, because they can't stake everything on Mitch McConnell, will make the Democratic agenda a lot better to be able to actually move things as time goes on. So I just wanted to point that out because a lot of people do say that to me. Why, why should they?
Well, you're basically setting the place. You're you're setting the table here.
Correct. Yep. And you and I talked about a little bit yesterday about what was going to be unveiled here with the search warrants, and the FBI did have search warrants, and they were looking for what type of the Southern District of New York was looking for, what was involved with Hope Hicks, who used to work for the president, and Cohen involved in any type of situation of a cover-up with the money, paid to Stormy Daniels. And
Right.
I think then also
And this started on October 9th, the day after the Access Hollywood tapes dropped. Trump apparently got on the horn and said, hey, there's a couple women who are willing to talk about affairs they had with me. Let's pay them off. Cohen ran with it. Pecker took one of them, Karen McDougal, and paid her off. And Michael Cohen paid off Stormy Daniels. And, they had multiple phone calls about it, including the phone call on the day that the check finally cleared, which was, I think, October 29th. This was, a week before the election.
Right.
Donald Trump engaged in a massive illegal cover-up. Now, you were a member of Congress. If you had done that when you were in the House of Representatives, what would have happened? Would you have gone to jail?
Well, I can tell you right now, I filed a form that was not correct on the money, and I went to jail for that. And I actually filed the form. I didn't not file it. So
Right.
yes, I.
So you went to jail for a campaign
finance.
you were involved in the whole Jack Abramoff thing, and you went to jail for a campaign finance violation, which was small compared to what Donald Trump. We just saw the documentation on what he did.
Right. So to answer your question, of course I would have went to jail a lot longer than I went for the golf trip. No question about that of the filing. Yeah. Anybody would. I mean, if a person utilized their campaign money, a member of Congress, to actually pay off somebody involving, a situation where they were either being blackmailed or a sexual situation or anything, that is a big use of personal use of campaign funds, which is the number one no-no in a campaign.
Yeah, and if I recall from reading your book, Sideswiped, you went to jail over what was around $5,000, and you didn't even realize that it was happening.
Right, and and things happen, but if they want to really look into it, yes, there was a difference of $5,000 on a form that I filed. Actually, Tom, if I had not filed the form, I would have been okay, but filing the form caused the problem, and then it's a fraud, and it's a fraud on a federal document. So if you look at this is clearly fraud on a federal document because they had to follow back up. Remember, when you're in the campaign, you have to list what you spend and your expenditures of the campaign. I don't think covering up a sexual situation was ever listed on their campaign accounts.
Somehow I doubt it. Whereas you actually listed, yes, I went to Scotland and played golf with Jack Abramoff, and boom, they came after you. And I think they came after you because, frankly, you spoke Farsi, you'd lived in Iran, you'd worked in Iran, and the Iranians came to you and said, we would like to recognize Israel and cut a deal with the Bush administration. And you passed that information along to the Bush State Department, and boom, a few months later, they were throwing your butt in jail, if I'm remembering correctly.
Dick Cheney was unhappy, and it involved Dallas Fisher, who did the waterboarding cover-up for Alberto Gonzalez. I wrote a whole chapter on it called The Perfect Storm. I did some dumb things, but then, of course, there were some other influences there. But I think it clearly points out that, people have been convicted for different discretions and campaign finance discretions over the years. This one, the FBI sought the warrant because of involvement and collusion. So I don't understand why something didn't lead to a charge being filed on the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission. That's
well, apparently that's the direction it was going until Bill Barr became Attorney General, and within 3 weeks of his becoming Attorney General, they dropped all the charges. In fact, they stopped the investigation. Right. The Trump organization was supposed to be deposed, and they suddenly said, "Oh, we don't need to talk to you." Mm-hmm. So Bill Barr, cover-up artist, strikes again. Bob, we got 30 seconds. What else is up?
Oh, I wanted to mention about the rally. Even some right bloggers have called it disgusting, what was said there. But I also want to point out, knowing strategy in the Republicans and the Trump administration, he likes this. He likes the engagement of Trump versus the squad versus Pelosi, and it's almost like he's trying to hijack the Democratic primary at this point in time by keeping this. This is not the end of it. You will see more of him trying to make this about him during the Democratic primary for president.
Amazing. Bob, always great talking with you. Bob Ney, thank you so much. And his book is Sideswiped if you want to read all about it. It's an amazing book. I mean, he lays out actual crimes that John Boehner, Bob, committed?
John Boehner.
Yeah. Actual crimes that you're willing to testify to. You write it in the book. I'm willing to testify.
I would tomorrow.
Yep, there you go. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the two murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. The other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American black shirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow black shirts charged out brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Book, A Woman of third hour talk.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Donald Trump solidifies his attacks on Ilhan Omar as the crowd chants, send her back. I mean, you get this? Send her back, what this is? And you know, where this goes, and now Donald Trump says, well, I didn't really mean that. I didn't agree with that. Wait a minute, it's your tweet. They're quoting your tweet. Oh, my God. So the fact that Trump is starting to walk this back tells me that he realizes he's gone too far. I mean, you've got Republicans coming out and saying it looks like he's trying to get Representative Omar killed. It certainly looks that way to me. I mean, you know, look at groups that Trump has attacked. And look at all the killings, all the political killings by white supremacists that we've seen just since Trump became president. Not that they weren't happening before that. I mean, when we had our first black president, it whipped them into a foaming froth. But what's the end product of this? Of Donald Trump playing demagogue, Donald Trump playing fascist. And not just Donald Trump, by the way. You've got, Lindsey Graham saying, oh, well, I don't think there's anything racist about this. And then yesterday, Mike Lee and Rand Paul, who were just fine with the tax cuts that were not paid for, $1.5 trillion. Let's throw a few $1 million to the 9/11 responders. They're dying. They need health care. Their families are being wiped out by their medical expenses. Let's throw a few. No, we can't. We're going to put a hold on that legislation. This is what Mike Lee and Rand Paul did yesterday. These great paragons of virtue, these noble men who are willing to stand up to the system and make sure that a dying person who rushed in to help on 9/11 doesn't get any help from our government because it wasn't paid for by cutting back on food stamps, or it wasn't paid for by cutting back on unemployment insurance. It wasn't paid for by cutting back on housing assistance. It wasn't paid for by cutting back on education. If you'd like to call Mike Lee or Rand Paul, you can reach them through the congressional switchboard, 202-225-3121, 202-225-3121. Meanwhile, we've got this confused billionaire, Thom Friedman, the guy who tried to tell us that the Lexus was such a cool car. Remember, he wrote this book, The Lexus and the Olive Tree, that the Lexus was such a cool car because of the free market and free trade agreements. Wrote a whole book about it. Turned out it was complete BS. The Lexus was such a cool car because Toyota had been subsidized for decades by the Japanese government. They started out, selling fish. METI, the Ministry of Industry and Technology, the giant, we're going to create, we're going to turn Japan into a modern industrial economy. METI helped fund Toyota. The government of Japan blocked the import into Japan of American cars for decades leading up to the 70s to give Toyota a head start. They put tariffs on American cars coming into Japan. They're still there. And Friedman was like, oh, no, it was the free market. No, it wasn't the free market. It was Japan that built Toyota. So now he's coming out and he's saying, free trade is such a wonderful... Oh, his other thing was the Friedman unit. He was gung-ho to have a war with Iraq, and then, well, don't worry, it'll be over in 6 months. And he said that so many times that people started referring to 6 months, any 6-month period, as a Friedman unit. And now he's saying that, hey, those Democratic politicians who want us to stop giving literally trillions of dollars every year to for-profit pharmaceutical companies and that are making their money on inventions that we, the people, paid for through the National Institutes of Health. And for-profit insurance companies like United Healthcare that paid its last CEO, Stephen Hemsley, over $1 billion, and the guy before him, William McGuire, they called him Dollar Bill McGuire. He took over $1 billion. He took $1.6 billion. He had to give back $300 million because he had taken it fraudulently. He got busted. No, he didn't go to jail. Of course not. He's a billionaire and he runs a health insurance company. And so Thomas Friedman in today's New York Times is like, well, if we don't keep these things intact, the Democrats are going to lose the election. Right. What happened to the New Deal? What happened to the Great Society? What happened to the values that made this country great? What happened to the American middle class? When Ronald Reagan decided in the Republican Party in the 1980s, decided that the middle class was getting too big for their britches, that women were demanding rights, they were demanding equal pay. In fact, they were demanding an opportunity to go to the workplace. And the opportunity to have birth control, or even, God forbid, abortion, so that they could stay in the workplace if they accidentally got pregnant, or to avoid pregnancy. And young people were out in the streets saying, no, we don't want to go to Vietnam. Or, obviously this was post-Vietnam, but looking back at this, young people, hey, these young people, they're having too much sex. They're getting high. We got to throw them in prison. And ultimately what they decided was to take Russell Kirk's advice. Back in 1951, he wrote this book, The Conservative Mind, in which he said, and this was in 51, he said, within a decade, within a generation, you're going to see, if this middle class keeps growing the way it is right now, you're going to see a middle class that has so much political power that young people are going to rebel, women are going to rebel, people of color are going to rebel, the people who are supposed to, quote, know their place are not going to know their place anymore, and you're going to have mass chaos in the United States. This is what Russell Kirk was predicting. That book was the book that, The Conservative Mind, it's still the Bible of the conservative movement. It's the book that activated William F. Buckley and Barry Goldwater back in the 50s. And Reagan came into office and said, okay, let's put this plan into place. Let's take down the middle class. And today, in the House of Representatives, the Democrats passed legislation to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. If we had inflation adjusted the 1968 minimum wage, the minimum wage right now would be $22.38 an hour. And the Democrats just voted to raise it from $7.25 to $15 over a 5-year period. And they had to build in the 5-year period as a gimme to the Blue Dogs and the New Dem coalition, who were saying, we will not go along with this. You won't have enough votes. You won't have a Democratic majority if you raise the minimum wage too fast. So here we have this very modest raise in the minimum wage, and already the Republicans are saying, it's not even going to get a vote in the Senate. Why? Because the Republicans know that if the middle class ever goes back to what it was in the 1960s and 1970s, and frankly the late 1950s, if it ever goes back to a situation where one single person working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and no more, can raise a family, buy a house, buy a new car every couple of years, take a vacation, maybe even have a second vacation home, a modest one, but a second home, retire with a pension. If we ever go back to that, then America has become a socialist nation. Which is why they literally have a plan to rewrite the Constitution. I've just as an FYI, I've got an op-ed out there that you can now find on Alternet, Common Dreams, Truthdig, LA Progressive, a Nation of Change. It's titled How a Trojan Horse Project to Rewrite Our Constitution Could Actually Happen If Trump Wins in 2020. And it's about this plan that's been funded by the Kochs and other right-wing billionaires to have a constitutional convention right after Donald Trump gets reelected and rewrite the Constitution and end the federal income tax. No more income tax. End all social welfare programs. End Social Security and Medicare. Basically make them unconstitutional. This is their agenda. And they're bragging about it, by the way. They're proud of it. You'll find the links to their website, a couple of dozen links to their website in my article. Yeah, let's do this. If Trump gets reelected, we're down with this. We can make this happen. They did their first dress rehearsal in Washington, D.C. back in 2013. A couple of years ago, the most recent dress rehearsal, and this was in 2016. It wasn't the most recent, but the one in 2016. And this is on Wikipedia. I mean, they're bragging about it. An assembly of 137 delegates representing every state gathered to conduct a simulated convention. The simulated convention passed amendments requiring the states to approve any increase in the national debt. In other words, we would not have been able to fight World War II. Imposing term limits. In other words, no more institutional memory in our legislative bodies. Instead, only the lobbyists are the ones who know how things work. That's where you have to go if you're a new legislator. Restricting the scope of the Commerce Clause. In other words, no more child labor laws. No more right to unionize. limiting the power of federal regulations, no more EPA, no more no more pure drugs, no more, clean water, all that kind of stuff, and requiring a supermajority to impose federal taxes, and giving the states the power to abrogate, as in ignore, any federal law, regulation, or executive order, taking us literally, I mean, this is not just undoing America since the New Deal. This is undoing America since the signing of the Constitution. This is taking us back to the Articles of Confederation, when individual states could say to the federal government, screw you, we're not going to do what you want. This is their agenda. And then they've got this giant blubbery orange thing out here, in front of a screaming crowd yelling, send her back, about 4 women of color in Congress.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I just tweeted, I made a contribution to Ilhan Omar's campaign today. First time I've ever contributed to her, in honor of the work that she's doing. And welcome back. Archie in Yucca Valley, California. Hey, Archie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Archie.
Long time to speak to you. On May 5th, 2016, roaring along for Bernie, my heart decided to break. Anyhow.
Oh, you had a heart attack?
No, I had what they call an aortic dissection.
Yikes.
That's what took out John Ritter, but, they discovered a lot after he went through that.
Yeah.
He had a type A. My aorta came apart on the descending side, so it's affected basically my physical stamina, ability.
Yeah, I get it. I'm sorry to hear that, Archie. But that's not what you called about. You called about Trump, right?
Well, I called about Trump and sedition.
Okay.
We, long time, about 3-4 years ago, I called up and you gave me the honor to read the Black's Law definition of sedition, and you took a great interest and talked about it for a couple days. Well, he's out and out committing treason, and committing sedition, which isn't illegal because there's no overt act of violence. And
so refresh my memory of the dictionary definition of sedition.
I got it right here in my hands. An insurrection, this is a law dictionary, an insurrectionary movement leaning towards treason, but wanting for an overt act.
Right.
Attempts made by meetings or speeches or by publication to disturb the tranquility of the state. And then it goes on to the distinction between sedition and treason, but you can find that in Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution. But I do think Donald Trump committed treason when it came out that he was negotiating secretly with the Russians to build a hotel in Moscow and give Putin the tin house.
Yeah.
But
I think it goes beyond that. I think he's trying to cut a deal with the Saudis. He's already got a deal going with the Emiratis. I believe there's a Trump Tower in Dubai. He's already got a deal. He's got a Trump Tower in Turkey. He's got a Trump Tower in the Philippines. I mean, all these countries that have these dictators, many of them, most of them have Trump Towers. And I think that this is all about the bucks for him.
You got it. And they got that real big building in North Korea, that big pyramid of cement that never got finished. Tom, I love you and Louise and your whole team. Thanks for everything you do. And when I came home after that heart thing, the other day somebody mentioned this. Every day and every way, I'm getting better and better. I came home and put that in giant letters at the foot of my bed because this is terminal.
Yeah.
And then I set a goal. I want to live till July 20th, 2019. We know what happened that day, right?
No, it's
greatest engineering and scientific achievement.
Oh, walking on the moon.
Man.
Yeah.
You're walking on the moon.
Well, Archie, God willing, may you live many years longer. I appreciate your call, and I wish you the very best. Archie, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And just to continue our conversations, Tim in Naples, Maine. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
First of all, you're blowing me away with all your topics today. My head's swimming.
Yeah.
All right. I'm watching this thing. You talk about propaganda. I'm watching this thing called Newsmax. Right? Are you familiar with?
Yeah,
this
it's a billionaire-funded right-wing.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's part
so
TV.
I'm watching it the other night.
Yeah.
I'm watching and like they have this. They have an old black and white stuff on, and it's about the old Russian czars and how they were taken down and all that way back at the turn of the 19th or 20th century in that area. Right. And then there's a commercial on, and then it had these black screens and it had this red writing on it. This total propaganda and brainwashing. Are you sick of being treated like such and such? Are you sick of being put down? Watch the following series to figure out how to fight back. It was like it was just so overt. And then there's a commercial. I swear, have you seen this one yet? The Trumpy Bear?
Yeah.
Have you seen this? It's
I have. I know.
I'm watching this commercial and I'm saying, is this comedy?
No, it's not. It's not comedy. It's not satire. It's real, and it's not just that particular website that I don't want you to name again. But there are several of them out there doing this right now, Jim. And the money that has been poured into media over the last 30 years by Republican donors and Republican affiliated billionaires is absolutely massive. And I remember going to Washington D.C. with Randy Rhodes and a bunch of other talk show hosts back in the mid-2000s during the Bush campaign or the Bush administration, and pleading with Democratic senators to encourage their donors and people they know, the wealthy people that they know, to buy some media, to start building out a progressive media infrastructure, and basically just getting blown off. I mean, just getting blown off. I don't know how to describe it beyond that. So anyhow, there you are. Tony in Cleveland. Hey, Tony, quick one, please.
Yeah, Tom. Oops. I tried to turn the speaker off. There's so many things to talk about, but just a couple of things. You mentioned earlier the swamp, and I was thinking about it, and I said, well, Trump hasn't drained the swamp. He's actually turned it into Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah, it's a great metaphor. I mean, this is exactly what's happened. He's put an oil lobbyist in charge of Interior. He's put a coal lobbyist in charge of EPA. He's now put a Raytheon lobbyist, a defense lobbyist, in charge of the Defense Department. I mean, it's like it's not even the swamp anymore. It's like the zoo. Tony, thank you. Yeah. Excellent point. Excellent point. We'll be back. We're hitting the bottom of the hour here. We'll be back with more of your calls after this short break, shall we say. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. No, seriously, we have to get engaged and we have to win. Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink by Thom Hartmann. And this is from Chapter 2, The Economy. The epigraph Woody Guthrie's saying, some men rob you with a six gun, others rob you with a fountain pen. The title, the opening part of this chapter, The Coup of the Elites. The election of 1992 pitted Bill Clinton against George H.W. Bush. While Bush was running as a conservative who was compassionate enough to hope for 1,000 points of privatized non-governmental light, Clinton campaigned as an unabashed FDR, believing in government as a solution liberal. In language reminiscent of Teddy Roosevelt's Progressive Square Deal and FDR's Progressive New Deal, Clinton proposed a new covenant between the U.S. government and U.S. citizens. In a speech at Georgetown University on October 23, 1991, he declared, "We've got to rebuild our political life before the demagogues and the racists and those who pander to the worst in us bring this country down. People once looked at the president and the Congress to bring us together, to solve problems, to make progress. Now, in the face of massive challenges, our government stands discredited, our people are disillusioned. There's a hole in our politics where our sense of common purpose used to be. To turn America around, we've got to have a new approach, founded on our most sacred principles as a nation, with a vision for the future. We need a new covenant, a solemn agreement between the people and their government to provide opportunity for everybody, inspire responsibility throughout our society, and restore a sense of community to our great nation. A new covenant to take government back from the powerful interests in the bureaucracy and give it back to the ordinary people of our country." More than 200 years ago, our founding fathers outlined our first social compact between government and the people, not just between lords and kings. More than 100 years ago, Abraham Lincoln gave his life to maintain the union that compact created. More than 60 years ago, Franklin Roosevelt renewed that promise with a New Deal that offered opportunity in return for hard work. Today, we need to forge a new covenant that will repair the damaged bond between the people and their government, restore our basic values, embed the idea that a country has the responsibility to help people get ahead, but that the citizens have not only the right, but the responsibility to rise as far and fast as their talents and determination can take them. And most important of all, that we're all in this together. We have to make good on the words of Thomas Jefferson, who once said, "A debt of service is due from every man to his country, proportional to the bounties which nature and fortune have measured to him." End of quote from Bill Clinton. Americans loved it. A majority of voters in 1992 were old enough to remember what America was like under the 1940 to 1981 New Deal era, when a single worker with a good job had health care, a pension, and could raise a family and buy a home. When the GI Bill educated millions. When hospitals and health insurance companies in nearly every state were required by law to be not-for-profit corporations, and health care was inexpensive and widely available. And they noticed that the 12 years of Reagan and Bush had begun the process of shattering that historic era, that the middle class was slipping away, the government had become remote and hostile rather than protecting the rights of workers and the middle class. Americans elected Clinton based on his FDR-style rhetoric. They were looking forward to a return to the golden age of America's middle class. They were ready for the new covenant, and apparently so was Bill Clinton. There is every sign that he actually believed his own rhetoric. On all this, he won the election in November and spent that month and December preparing his new covenant programs to restore the American middle class. Until January. As Adam Curtis brilliantly points out in a special documentary series he did for the BBC titled The Trap, a few weeks before Bill Clinton was to be sworn into office as President of the United States, he was visited by Goldman Sachs CEO Robert Rubin, who had just taken a $40 million paycheck for his last year with Goldman and would soon become the head of Clinton's economic team tasked with carrying out the new covenant, and with Alan Greenspan. Rubin and Greenspan sat the young new president down and told him the facts of life as they saw them. Clinton would not govern as an FDR liberal. Instead, he must cut government, promote free trade, and reduce regulation of business. Clinton complied and has been richly rewarded. In his second inaugural address, he declared, "The era of big government is over." The philosophy represented by Rubin and Greenspan doesn't believe in government as a solution to much of anything other than wars and crime. As true classical conservatives in the mold of Sir Edmund Burke and Thomas Hobbes, many modern libertarians and neoliberals don't even believe in democracy. As any libertarian will honestly admit, they call it the tyranny of the majority, or mob rule. Instead, because they believe in the inherently evil nature of most humans, they held that a small ruling elite of good people, the wise ones, must concentrate wealth and power, the first fuels the second by and large, in a small number of hands, out of the reach of what the first American conservative president John Adams called the rabble, us. They believed that social stability was more important than social mobility. As of this writing, the surest way to become wealthy in the United States or Britain is to be born to wealthy parents. The surest way to be poor is to be born to poor parents. Social mobility, the ability to move between classes for better or worse, has been rolled back from its highly fluid levels in the 1940 to 1980 years to a rigidity last measured in the 1920s as America was sliding into the Republican Great Depression. Conservatives, since Sir Edmund Burke's opposition to the Revolutionary War of 1776 to today's opponents of labor rights, believe that too much power and wealth in the hands of the middle class will inevitably lead to instability. The book, Threshold, The Progressive Plan to Take America Back from the Brink.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Nancy, you want your proof that Donald Trump committed a crime? It was just released by a federal judge. Donald Trump, Hope Hicks, David Pecker, and Michael Cohen conspired to violate U.S. campaign finance laws. You will recall that, allegations like this were not quite like this, but, were charged against Bill Clinton at some time. Yeah, I mean, this is what Bob Ney went to jail for. He filed a form with the federal government after he went on a golfing trip to Scotland with Jack Abramoff. Came back and said, yeah, here I went on this trip, and he listed some of the expenses, and he missed the $5,000 worth of hotel rooms that he had while he was there, or maybe it was the airplane ride, whatever it was. He missed that, and he literally went to prison for that, for a campaign finance violation. Prison. Sitting member of Congress, Republican congressman from Ohio. He wrote a book about it called Sideswiped. We were talking about it just 15 minutes ago, or 45 minutes ago, on this program. In fact, Nate's going to take a clip of that and put it up on YouTube so that you can see it if you're just tuning in. But, if you want an impeachable offense, if you want a crime, an actual crime, here it is. And it was in the process of being prosecuted by the Justice Department until Bill Barr came in, and then Bill Barr put an end to it. He said, we're not even going to finish investigating it. We don't even have to take the depositions from the Trump organization that had already been subpoenaed, or whatever the fancy word is for taking a deposition. I think it's a subpoena, but I could be wrong. Here we are. Donald Trump and his press secretary were directly involved in discussions that led to an illegal hush money payment to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 election campaign, according to the FBI. Lead sentence in The Guardian today. Our president is a criminal. Hope Hicks is a criminal. Michael Cohen is a criminal. Oddly, he's the only one who's in jail for this crime, by the way. And David Pecker is a criminal, if this story is right. And meanwhile, this criminal stands in front of a crowd that's chanting about an African-American woman, a Somali refugee when she was 10 years old, who came to the United States and achieved the American dream, right? Rose to prominence and became a member of Congress. And this bloated monstrosity, this criminal is standing in front of them with a you can't even use that expression, a grin on his face as they're chanting, send her back. Send her back. Here it is.
Medic screeds.
Okay. All he needs is Leni Riefenstahl, right? The filmmaker who made Triumph of the Will, the movie about the 1937 Nuremberg rallies, which were very much like this. Leni Riefenstahl, brilliant filmmaker. She's now, long gone. But Trump's got his own Leni Riefenstahl. It's called Fox News. It's mind-boggling. Anyhow, pick up some of your phone calls here. Michael in New York City. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Excuse my cough just now.
It's all good.
Just to add to what you were saying, and you're giving Nancy Pelosi and Democrats, as well as yours truly and many other Democrats, something for them to run on if you want to get political about this for 2020. And the whole thing is about the law, about the Constitution, the two words which Trump, ironically, wants to keep using and cloaking himself with, but then is forever defying it. And what happened yesterday, or the past 72 to 96 hours, with his attack towards people of color, Congress women, who are government officials, by the way, he also violated another law, the EEO laws that I learned from Joe Scarborough. And anybody that's in the workforce, that works in a professional office or whatever, right. We have these workshops that describes the EEO laws, which is a prohibition of workplace harassment, and to promote a fairly peaceful work-like atmosphere where no one is subjected to any kind of harassment or...
Right, the specific federal laws against harassing people in the workplace, in the federal workplace. These are laws that concern federal employees, and there are and the specific guidelines that are part of the law. It says, you may not harass people using phrases such as "go back to the country you came from," in quotes.
Bingo.
It's literally written into the law. Donald Trump broke that law too. I'm with you. But I think the campaign finance violation is a much bigger one because, frankly, I don't think he'd be in the White House if he hadn't broken that law.
But this is kind of big also because every time Trump opens his mouth with this kind of rhetoric, he incites the violence and amongst his base, and then somebody in his base winds up carrying it out physically. We remember Charlottesville. We remember Charleston with Dylan Roof. I mean, we can even go with Caesar, what's his name, that was sending around the pipe bombs. And people don't believe that. Then you go back to like early 2000s or 2010, I forgot the year, but when Gabby Giffords was nearly assassinated because of Sarah Palin's rhetoric, another Republican big mouth who didn't give a rat's rump on people's safety and kept inciting and encouraging that kind of violent stuff.
Yeah, here we are. Michael, thank you.
And if people want a case study, go to Arizona v. Ford, Shauna Ford, the only right-wing extremist that was convicted on something like that and was convicted of first-degree murder.
Yeah, there you go. Michael, thank you for the call. Paul in Beaumont, Texas. It says here you're a right-wing troll. What do you want to troll me about?
Troll. No. Actually, I love listening to both sides. Okay, I'm kind of like a centrist.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Okay. No. Honestly,
I'm with Jim Hightower. Okay. The only thing in the middle of the road are dead armadillos and yellow stripes. But so you're a guy who doesn't like to take a position on things. What are you calling about?
No. Here's my point. Okay, you say Canada has such a great healthcare system. They got 37 million people. Denmark's got 5.7 million people. Sweden's got 9.9 billion. We got 327 million people here.
Paul, all of Europe has over 800 million people. And all of Europe has health care for everybody. You will not find one single medical bankruptcy in Europe. None. You will not find a single medical bankruptcy in Canada. None. You will find 600,000 of them last year in the United States. And you and other... I don't know how to characterize you. I don't understand why you would think that it's a good idea that Dollar Bill McGuire and Stephen J. Hemsley, the last two CEOs of United Healthcare, should both each take over $1 billion of your healthcare dollars so that they can have 7 mansions, so that Hemsley can have 7 mansions in different countries in the world out of your healthcare dollars. We spend 19% of our GDP on healthcare. The rest of the world world, Canada, Europe, they spend around 9% of their GDP on health care. I don't understand why you and other Republicans think that we should continue to subsidize a parasitic industry.
That's not what I'm saying. What I want to know, honestly, I wasn't for Obamacare. My wife's on it. Okay, I'm self-employed. Okay, is what it is. Kind of changed my views on it. Okay, honestly, like I said, I just want to know how this can be sustained long term. Because how much is a gallon of gas in Canada? We're talking 37 million people.
Paul, how long ago was 1887?
A while back.
Yeah, about 140 years, maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
That's when Germany first put into place the world's first single-payer national health care system. Okay. So you ask, how long can it be sustained? Well, so far we know it can run for 140 years.
Germany. I'm talking about here in America.
Well, Paul, you don't think that we're as smart as the Germans?
I want to know what I'm saying.
Is it that we're too stupid to do it?
Canada ranks 24th in the world.
In what?
Healthcare.
They rank above us. They have a longer lifespan than we do, both men and women. They have a lower infant mortality rate. The fewer children die in childbirth. Fewer mothers die in childbirth in Canada. They have better cure rates for virtually every disease in Canada than we have here in the United States. There are no medical bankruptcies in that country. You can go to college and not end up, in debt that you can't get married or raise a family or buy a house in Canada. What are you saying, that Americans are just too stupid to do it? I don't get it. I realize watching a Trump rally, you might think that, but I'm actually somebody who thinks Americans are as smart as Canadians.
I think we're smarter than Canadians.
Okay, then why can't we do this?
Because the population is so different. And
what is different about our population? Europe is 800 million people. Canada is 37 million people. The United States is 300 million people. What is the difference?
300 million people
versus Europe's 800 million.
Okay. Like I said, I just want to know what's the cost going to be to us, and how sustainable is this?
It'll be less than we're paying now.
Because I know in Canada, a gallon of gas is what, $6-7?
I have no idea what a gallon of gas is in Canada, and that has nothing to do with health care, Paul. The question is why when a health insurance company handles your health care dollars, they skim 20% off the top. They used to take 25 and 30%. Obamacare limits them to 20%. So they're taking 20% off the top to pay for, all of their expenses and all the CEO salaries. United Healthcare has over 100 people making over $1 million a year, just one company. And they're skimming this money off the top so that they can get rich and so they can pay dividends to their investors. For what purpose?
I'm totally all for everybody getting health care.
You know what the overhead is for Medicare?
I just want to know.
Serious question. Do you know what the I just told you the overhead for health insurance companies is 20%. The Albert Einstein Hospital in New York City has about the exact same number of beds as, I'm forgetting the name of it, it's St. Somebody or other's hospital in Toronto, Canada, right? There's two hospitals that are almost identical in size, number of beds, number of patients. The hospital in New York City has an entire floor with over 100 people working in it doing billing because of the insurance companies. In Canada, the hospital has one office with 2 employees that do the billing.
Red tape. It's got way too much red tape.
It's not red tape. It's a scam. They're skimming. They're taking our money. So I asked you if you know the overhead of Medicare. I'll tell you what it is. It's 3%. Medicare runs on 3%, and that includes everything. That's the buildings and everything. If you take just the personnel part of Medicare, because the buildings are all federally owned, it's about 1.5%. So we can run health, and that's, by the way, is what the overhead is in Canada. That's what the overhead is in Germany. It's what it is in France. It's what it is in Sweden. It's 1.5% to 3%. But here in the United States, our overhead, which includes corporate profit and everything, is 20%. We are not paying that for any good reason. We're only paying that because those billionaires that 20% is making rich hire lobbyists who buy politicians, mostly Republican politicians who keep this kind of absurdity in place.
The same thing with pharmaceuticals. We're kind of on the same page. Okay, well, I'm not against health care for people. Okay, I don't think people realize though the cost is going to be associated with this.
It's going to go down. If we went to Medicare for all, the costs would go down.
I mean, what you're going to pay daily,
the cost would go down.
Grocery store, when you go to the gas station.
Paul, I strongly encourage. The cost of healthcare has absolutely nothing to do with the cost of gasoline. Toyota was going to build a car factory in northern Indiana or northern Ohio, and they decided at the last minute to build it in Canada instead because there's $2,600 worth of health insurance in a car. And they wanted to build them in Canada instead. So all the jobs went to Canada. I mean, a national health insurance plan, with a national health insurance plan, a single-payer health insurance plan, I wouldn't have to pay, workman's compensation insurance because everybody gets compensated if they get injured because everybody has insurance. I mean, we wouldn't have to have Medicare, Medicaid, and 16 different programs. We could have everybody covered, and it would cost less money. That's the thing. The Koch brothers funded a study, and they found it would cost trillions less to have national health care.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back. It's 48 minutes past the hour. Stick around. Welcome back. Joan in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Joan, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind today?
Tom, I am willing to bet my social security check for November that Trump is going to win in 2020.
Well, you're betting your entire Social Security, Joan, because if Trump wins, Social Security is going to go away.
Exactly.
So why do you think he's going to win?
He's going to win because the most important thing, and don't take this the wrong way, I'm not trashing whites, I'm just making a point. Whiteness is the most important thing in the world to whites. It's more important than being human. It's more important than being a Christian. And it's because of what you have said, what I've heard you say, is that if you give a person someone else to look down on, they will help the pickpocketers, those who are picking their pockets.
Yep.
They will help them.
Yep, that's what Lyndon Johnson said. That's what Lyndon Johnson said. He said, you tell the lowest white man that he's better than the highest black man, and he will let you pick his pocket. And Johnson wasn't bragging. He was complaining. He was saying, this is wrong.
Exactly. And whites are not going to give that status up. Yep. They will eat bricks. They will watch Trump rape their own children in front of them and rationalize it. Trump is going to win in 2020. And I said he was going to win in 2016 for the same reason. Yeah. And what you see happening down on the border with those kids, even though no one in America, very few people in America have any compassion or empathize with the conditions that black people deal with, I thank God that I can look at that scene and cry. Even though they are not African Americans, they are human beings. But few people cry for African Americans. And because they don't, then it opens the path to what's happening down on the border. And it's not going to stop there, Tom. And they're not going to stop with people of color. They're going to come for whites. Anybody who disagrees with them or interferes with them making money, they are going to come after them.
Well, they already did. They came after the white middle class in a big way in the 1980s, and the white middle class has been wiped out, and thus you've got the opioid epidemic, and you've got the suicide epidemic, and you got all this stuff going on. I completely agree with everything you've said, Joan. And forgive me for interrupting you.
And the former RNC chairman, Richard Steele said the other day on MSNBC that the Democrats are fighting a traditional political war when Trump and his allies are fighting an asymmetrical war.
I agree.
The Americans lost the Vietnam War for one of the same reasons.
Yep.
You know, and I just don't understand why they can't see it, and it makes me think that the corporate media and the Democrats are complicit. I don't believe that the Republicans are smarter than the Democrats.
Yeah. I think the problem is simpler than that, Joan. I think it's that you've got a large enough chunk of the Democratic Party that's in the pockets of corporate America that they actually can't pass legislation without those people. Joan, I got to run. Thank you for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Richard in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Oh, hi. Yeah, actually, I was going to drop off, but 2 callers ago, we had the fellow who was wondering how to pay for things, and that was why I was for health care, et cetera. Right. But I wanted to say Cuba has some better results than we do, by the way, for him to listen to other people. Canada gas price is $5.4 a U.S. gallon.
Are you Canadian, Richard?
No, sir. I just have an internet connection.
Okay. Yeah.
But the real point is that whenever we have this debate, and it's going to get worse before the election, is about healthcare and how do we pay for it. Well, I've been looking at military spending for a while. You know, even though nobody else does, apparently they don't audit it for sure. And Nation magazine had an article in May. We're spending on record, like $750 billion, which is really $1.25 trillion because there's another $500 billion, another $500 billion added to it. And those are the questions that never get asked. And in America, you can't question the military, unfortunately. That's one of the reasons that we're so stuck with these other problems. But when these people call up and talk about spending it, why don't they mention the same thing? I preach to the choir.
Yeah, and the next time, I have to get it in my head that the next time some Republican calls up and says, my whole issue is taxes, I need to say, well, you realize more than half of all your taxes are going to this bloated military. And that was virtually half the size that it is now at the end of the Clinton administration.
Well, it's much bigger than any of the other ones, and that's taking the like a $600 billion cost savings, would double that.
Yeah, it's insane. Richard, you made your point, and I'm going to move along. And also, your phone is breaking up, and it's hard for me to understand what you're saying. But I get it. Michael in Denver. Hey, Michael, what's up? Thanks for waiting for over an hour there on hold. What's up?
That's okay, Tom. I'll try to make this as quick as I can. I was listening when you were talking to the person about Canada and health insurance and everything.
Right.
I just want to make a point here. My mom used to put radios in B-17s that flew over Germany and all. She didn't get anything after the war, and most women didn't. They just went back home and all went to school if they could, went to work at other industries. What I want to do is basically plant a seed here. Home care providers like myself, I can't afford to put her in any skilled nursing facility, so I retired to come and take care of my mom, who's 96 years old, and her next birthday here next month. Mm-hmm. And no one talks about that as part of the problem with our health care insurance and everything. There are millions of us out here that every day we're doing basically God's work. I have visiting nurses that come in here because they get paid by Medicare, by our Medicare, our tax dollars, and they do wonderful work. Yep. But it's still a tough job, and I honestly think no one really cares. I'm going to go to a focus group finally here with other people like myself to talk about this and hopefully bring this to a national profile. That's part.
Well, as the baby boomers are aging out, and the generation, of the baby boomers' parents are going into nursing care very rapidly now, or dying off, one or the other. I think that this is going to get much more high profile, particularly as the expenses start falling on the younger generation. And there's really not much left, given all the money that has been vacuumed up by the billionaires over the last 40 years. So amen. Michael, thank you for the call, and thank you all for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. It'll be Anything Goes Friday. Although we are going to talk to what's his name, Sean? Jason Stanley, thank you, the guy who wrote the book on fascism, and who today was saying, okay, I saw it last night in the Trump rally. We'll have a conversation with him, and then it'll be Anything Goes Friday. So, and don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It actually requires you. Yes, you. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Tell your friends about our show, too.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.